Chapter 774. After finding a dense forest, Gray took out the corpse of the rule-level bird beast. As soon as the corpse of the rule-level bird beast appeared, a strong pressure spread out. All the surrounding creatures, whether they were in the sky, on the ground, or underground, fled in fear. It was like the end of the world. Some of the weaker blood fiends fell to the ground and died under this strong pressure, leaving corpses all over the ground. For a time, the area within a few dozen kilometers of the rule-level bird beast became a forbidden zone for life. I hope it works. Gray looked at the huge body of the rule-level bird beast and muttered to himself. Then, he flew up and stuffed the core of the corpse-controlling ability into the huge bird's mouth. Then there was a long wait. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Half an hour. After half an hour, there was still no reaction. Just as Gray thought that he had failed, a change finally happened. Dong! The huge body of the rule-level bird beast trembled slightly. Compared to its huge body, it was only a small tremor, but it triggered an earthquake-like movement. The ground rose and fell violently. The soil rolled like waves, and large swaths of trees collapsed. Dong! Another tremor appeared. The collapsed trees in the surrounding area seemed to be in a vast ocean under this tremor. They rose and fell, and terrifying waves swept out. Dong, dong, dong. Tremors appeared one after another. Waves appeared on the ground one after another. The surrounding area was like a yellow ocean. The tremors lasted for half an hour before they stopped. When the tremors stopped, the surrounding terrain had completely changed. The mountains had collapsed, and the valleys had been filled, turning into an extremely flat ground. Gray did not have time to pay attention to the huge changes in the terrain. His gaze fell on the rule-level bird beast and could not leave it. His heart was filled with excitement. At that moment, he had already obtained control of the rule-level bird beast. With a thought, he could control the rule-level bird beast that had once been able to contend with a rule-level expert. Of course, the rule-level bird beast, which only had physical strength left, was definitely unable to contend with a rule-level expert. Even so, its combat strength was definitely enough to surpass a level 6 Annihilation Giant. With this super trump card, he would undoubtedly be able to face the Sorcerer's Saint Hall with more ease. He would truly be able to achieve the level of being fearless as long as he was not in the Rule Realm. After moving to a place with dense vegetation and healing the injuries on the bird beast, Gray put away the bird beast and summoned Sophia and the others from the plane. The 5 of them went straight to the Sorcerer's Saint Temple. A day later, a huge mountain range that looked like a horned dragon appeared in front of them. The huge mountain range was ring-shaped, and there were over 100 peaks in total. Each peak was thousands of meters tall, and there was a huge steeple on each peak. The steeple was completely made of crystal and emitted a bright white light. The architectural style was exactly the same as the architectural style of the underwater ruins. This was where the Sorcerer's Sage Temple was located. Unlike most of the saint-ranked organizations that had their divine palaces located in huge cities, the Sorcerer's Saint Palace did not have their divine palaces located in cities. Instead, they were located in the depths of forests where powerful blood fiends roamed freely. Because of this reason, the Sorcerer's Saint Palace was more mysterious than the other saint-ranked organizations. Even the top families in the Holy Sorcerer territory did not know much about the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. Therefore, they were more respectful of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace, which proved the saying, "Fear the unknown." As soon as Gray and the others appeared, over 10 people immediately flew toward them and quickly surrounded them. All of these people were at the level of magic light. One of them, who looked like the leader of the group, was a middle-aged man who was at the 5th level of magic light. The presence on his body was sharper than that of an ordinary 5th level of magic light. It was very likely that he was a blood warrior with mixed powers. His combat power was probably enough to fight an ordinary annihilation class. "Who are you people?" The middle-aged man's hair was shaved, and there was a scorpion tattoo on his head. His eyes were sharp, like a poisonous scorpion staring at Gray and the others. "I am an elder of the Time and Space Temple. I have an important matter to discuss with the temple leader." Gray was not affected by the man's intimidating presence at all. He looked at the middle-aged man calmly. It was not just him. Sophia and the others were the same. The middle-aged man's presence was very powerful, but it was nothing to them. They had encountered the presence of rule-class blood beasts before, so the man's presence was a bit weak to them. An elder of the time and space temple. The middle-aged man looked at Gray suspiciously. Although he was very far away from the time and space temple, he had heard of the time and space temple. However, as far as he knew, the Sorcerer's St. Palace had never interacted with the time and space temple, and the man was too young. May I know why you are here? Sorry, this is very important. I can only tell you when I see the temple leader. Gray shook his head. They had thought of giving the rule book to the middle-aged man and then leaving to avoid entering the Sorcerer's St. Palace. However, the request in the letter was to give the rule book to the temple leader. If they gave it to someone else, they were worried that they would not be able to remove the curse. As for curses, they had only read about them in the Book of Curses. The introduction was very short, and their understanding of the derivative abilities of the curses was very limited. Luring the temple leader out was a good idea, but it could also allow the Sorcerer's St. Palace to be prepared and set up a trap in the dark. This would be more disadvantageous for them to escape. He was not alone now. He had Sophia and the other three with him. If they visited openly now, the Sorcerer's St. Palace would be at their lowest. When the time came, they would only need to give the rule book to the temple leader and teleport away. Their chances of success would be higher. Please wait a moment. I will send someone to inform the temple leader. The middle-aged man with the scorpion tattoo on his head hesitated for a moment before calling a young man over. He gave the young man an order, and the young man immediately flew towards the largest palace among the many palaces in the mountain range. That should be where the temple leader of the Sorcerer's St. Palace was. Although he was very suspicious of Gray's identity as an elder of the time and space temple, he was not worried about being deceived. Deceiving the Sorcerer's St. Palace was no different from seeking death. Gray and the other four did not have to wait for too long. Soon, the person who had just left returned and said to Gray and the other four, "The temple leader is asking for you. Everyone, please follow me." With the young man leading the way, Gray and the other four flew to the largest palace. They landed in front of a giant plaza in front of the palace. Through the palace's giant crystal door, which was as tall as the underwater ruin, and through many arches, Gray and the other four appeared in a very big palace. The palace's ceiling, floor, and even the supporting crystal pillars had beautiful carvings. All of the carvings were gathered together. It was as if they were telling an ancient story. Gray and the other four did not have the energy to pay attention to the story. They looked in front of the palace. In front of the palace, there was a crystal platform that was 30 feet tall. There was a giant crystal chair on top of the crystal platform. On both sides of the giant crystal chair, there were two people. It was a man and a woman. The man was tall and strong, and the woman was beautiful. What caught Gray and the other four's attention was that the presence of the two people was very strong. It was much stronger than the middle-aged man with the scorpion tattoo. They were probably not far away from the 6th level of Annihilation class. Sitting on the giant chair was a skinny old man wearing a holy crown. The old man was very skinny. He was so skinny that he was not normal. His bones were clearly visible. It was as if he was going to fall ill at any moment. Gray and the other four did not dare underestimate him because the skinny old man's presence was very strong. It was even stronger than an ordinary 6th level Annihilation class big shot. He should have been an elite that was very close to rule class. Greetings, temple leader. Gray and the other four knew he was the wizard temple leader. They bowed. Are you an elder of the time temple? The old man looked at Gray with suspicion. No matter how he looked at him, Gray looked too young. It made him wonder if Gray was an elder of the time temple. Yes. Gray nodded without hesitation. He was an elder of the time temple, although it was only in name. I wonder why the people of the time temple are looking for me. The wizard temple leader asked. He did not want to dwell on this issue. It did not matter if the person before him was an elder of the time temple or not. It did not matter to him. I have been asked by someone to return something. Gray took out the rule book from his space item. Curse rule book. Although they were far apart, the wizard temple leader's 6th level Annihilation class eyesight was able to see the curse rule on the rule book. Two beams of divine light shot out from his eyes. He reached out with his skinny right hand and grabbed at the air. Then, an invisible force appeared and grabbed the Book of Laws in Gray's hand. It flew quickly toward him and landed in his hand. It really is the curse rule book. The wizard temple leader opened the rule book and looked at its contents. He mumbled to himself. He looked very happy. Beside him, the man and woman were overjoyed. They stared excitedly at the Book of Laws in the hands of the master of the Shaman's Saint Hall. Thank you for finding the rule book for the wizard temple. Where did you get this rule book? After putting the rule book into a space item, the wizard temple leader looked at Gray and asked, We found it in a ruin. There was also a letter with the Book of Laws. The letter asked us to return it to the Shaman's Saint Hall, so we came to send it back. Gray said, Everyone, thank you for returning the Book of Laws. I'm sure everyone must be tired after rushing all the way here. I'll have someone prepare lunch. The wizard temple leader smiled and said warmly, Thank you for your kindness, but we have something urgent to do. We will not disturb you. Gray smiled apologetically and walked out of the temple with Sophia and the others. At this time, the voice of the wizard temple owner sounded behind them. Mister, have you seen the rulebook? Chapter 775. If I say we have not seen it, would you believe me? Gray stopped and turned around to look at the sorcerer temple leader. I do not believe you. The lord of the sorcerer temple, who had been smiling a moment ago, now had a cold look in his eyes. The curse rule is the foundation of the sorcerer temple. No outsider is allowed to see it. So I am sorry. Prison. The sorcerer temple leader's old voice had a strange rhythm to it. It was as if he was conducting an ancient ritual to communicate with the sky and earth. A strange change suddenly appeared around Gray and the other four. Around them, a 30-foot wide prison that looked like stone and metal appeared, trapping them in it. Curse rule. Gray and the other four looked at the sorcerer temple leader with an ugly expression. Using words alone to trigger an unpredictable power, it was no doubt a skill of the curse rule. It looks like you have seen the rule book. Then, all the more I cannot let you go. The sorcerer temple leader laughed coldly. I'm very grateful to you. With the rule book, my chances of breaking through to rule class are at least 30% higher. However, no matter what, I cannot let anyone who has seen the rule book leave alive. The rule book was too important to a saint class faction. It was not only the carrier of knowledge, but it was also the carrier of the experiences of past saints. So it cannot be seen by outsiders, even if the rule book was sent back by outsiders. It has indeed turned out this way. Blanca and the others felt their hearts sink. They had guessed this before they came, but they still had some hope. They hoped that the sorcerer temple leader would not pursue the matter because they had sent the rule book back. However, their hopes were dashed. The sorcerer temple would not allow them to see the rule book. Is this how you thank me? Gray looked coldly at the sorcerer temple leader. In front of him, a black shadow, tentacle extended. It is useless. Even an ordinary 6th level annihilation class giant would not be able to break it. You should just accept your fate. The sorcerer temple leader laughed mockingly. He was very confident in the prison derived from the curse rule. However, just as he finished speaking, the shadow tentacles wrapped around Sophia and the other three. Then Gray, Sophia, and the other three disappeared. Teleportation? He actually has the ability to teleport? His expression suddenly turned ugly. He had not expected that the other party would have the ability to teleport. After all, the other party's age clearly did not make him look like a big shot, and it was very rare to meet a son of saint. However, from the looks of it now, it was obvious that he had met a son of saint. Pass down the order. Arrest these 5 people in the name of the Sorcerer Saint Palace, regardless of whether they are dead or alive. With a gloomy expression and a thought flashing through his mind, he made a decision and ordered. Temple Master, the other party's identity is not ordinary. If we place a bounty on him, it is very likely that we will become enemies with the Space-Time Temple. The woman asked worriedly. This is the Holy Sorcerer territory, not the Space-Time territory. Furthermore, the Book of Laws cannot be obtained by outsiders, not even if they see it. The head of the Sorcerer Temple said with an unshakable will. Yes, the woman replied and quickly left. Tens of thousands of miles away from the Sorcerer's St. Hall, Gray and the other four appeared. I thought I was going to die. George's forehead was covered with cold sweat. The pressure brought by a powerful figure was unimaginable. Furthermore, in a place like the Sorcerer's St. Hall, he thought that he was going to die. Fortunately, Gray used his teleportation ability to bring them out. I'm afraid that the Sorcerer's St. Hall will not let this matter rest. Blanca wiped the cold sweat from her forehead and said with a worried expression on her beautiful face. Fortunately, the Book of Laws has been handed over to the head of the Sorcerer's St. Hall, and the curse has been lifted. Sophia said with a sigh. With the backing of the Space-Time Temple, she was not too worried about the threat of the Sorcerer's St. Hall. As long as they returned to the Space-Time Temple, the Sorcerer's St. Hall would not be able to do anything to her and Gray. The five of them relaxed and subconsciously looked at the snake tattoo on their left wrists. The next moment, their faces turned ugly. On their left wrists, the blood-colored snake tattoo was like a ferocious blood-colored snake. It was still wrapped around their wrists and did not lift the curse, even though they had returned the Book of Laws to the current head of the Sorcerer's St. Hall. How can this be? George's face was pale. They had taken such a huge risk to return the Book of Laws to the Sorcerer's St. Hall, but the curse had still not been lifted. We've been deceived. The person who left the curse had no intention of letting us, who had read the Book of Laws, live. Even if we returned the Book of Laws to the Sorcerer's St. Hall, it would not work. Gray's face was ashen. They had followed the instructions in the letter and returned the Book of Laws to the current head of the Sorcerer's St. Hall. However, the curse had not been lifted. The only explanation was that the person who left the curse had no intention of lifting the curse. How ruthless! Even on the brink of death, they still schemed like this. Landry's face turned ugly. The saint from the Sorcerer's St. Hall was clearly a ruthless person. He knew that he was about to die and could not personally bring the Book of Laws back to the Sorcerer's St. Hall. So he used the curse to force the person who had obtained the Book of Laws to return it to the Sorcerer's St. Hall. Furthermore, he did not want the contents of the Book of Laws to be leaked and had no intention of lifting the curse. Even if the five of them returned the Book of Laws, it would not work. What do we do now? Blanca's face turned ugly. No one wanted to die, let alone people like them who were talented and had a bright future. They were destined to become giants. The Sorcerer's St. Hall has controlled the curse law for so many years. They must know how to lift the curse. Gray lowered his head and fell into deep thought. After a while, he looked up with a sharp gaze. But the Sorcerer's St. Hall wants to kill us. How can they lift the curse for us? Blanca smiled bitterly and shook his head. Then we'll beat them until they hand over the method to lift the curse. In this life and death crisis, Gray's mind was unexpectedly calm and clear. Even if the saint from the Sorcerer's St. Hall was about to die, he still wanted to find a way to return the Book of Laws. The Book of Laws might not be as simple as just recording the rule blood technique. Without the Book of Laws, the Sorcerer's St. Hall might not have a rule powerhouse. That's indeed possible. I've heard that the Book of Laws contains the comprehension of a rule powerhouse. It's very helpful for breaking through to the rule realm. With the rule powerhouse killed and the Book of Laws missing, the Sorcerer's St. Hall might not have a rule powerhouse. Sophia nodded, confirming Gray's guess. Even if the Sorcerer's St. Hall doesn't have a rule powerhouse, there's still a saint-level organization. They have many giants. How can we force them to hand over the method to lift the curse? Blanca said without much hope. As long as there's no rule powerhouse, we can try. Gray's eyes were filled with confidence. He was not blind. He really had a certain level of confidence. What he really feared about the Sorcerer's St. Hall was the rule realm powerhouse. The strength of a rule realm powerhouse was not something he could fight against now, even if he used all his means. As long as there were no law-level powerhouses, it would be easy to deal with. He had the time law ability and space law ability. Even a powerhouse would not be able to do anything to him. In addition, now that he had obtained the corpse of a law-level blood beast, a saint-level force without a law-level powerhouse was not without a fighting chance. Without further explanation, Gray let the four of them enter the realm to hide. His eyes flashed with determination as he teleported toward the Sorcerer's Saint Hall. So, when he reappeared, he was already in the Shaman's Saint Hall. Looking at the hall where the Lord of the Shaman's Saint Hall was, a cold smile appeared on his lips. A beam of purple light swept towards the hall like a beam of apocalyptic light. Catcha! The purple light covered the palace. The surface of the palace flashed with many runes. They were strengthening patterns. With the existence of these strengthening patterns, even an annihilation class would not be able to damage the palace. It was a shame that the time law power was not an ordinary annihilation class power. The way it was used was not purely to destroy. It used time to wear it down. In an instant, the entire palace had experienced tens of thousands of years. The many strengthening patterns on the surface collapsed. Without the strengthening patterns, the palace was unable to withstand a single blow under the time law power. Boom! The palace was like a pile of sand that would break with a single touch. It collapsed. With a loud noise, dust filled the sky. It was like a yellow sandstorm. It spread toward the other palaces. Who is it? From the ruins of the palace, a few dozen people rushed out. They were all covered in dust. In other places, there were many powerful shadows coming. As the Sorcerer's Saint Hall was an important place, there were many elites there. Only Gray, who had the teleportation power, was able to avoid the elites and arrive there. Gray's attack shocked all the elites in the palace. Not only that, but people from the other mountains were also flying over. The people who were flying over had powerful presences. It was enough to make the heads of the most powerful families go numb. Even if they did not have any rule-class elites, they were still a Saint-class faction. It was not something the most powerful families could compete with. It is you. How dare you come back? Among the dozens of people who rushed out from the ruins, there was an extremely skinny old man. He was the temple master of the Sorcerer Temple. He stared coldly at Gray, and the terrifying killing intent on his body blew away the dust in the air. He had never thought that Feng Xingjian, who had already escaped, would be so bold as to turn back and destroy the main palace of the Sorcerer's Saint Hall. The Sorcerer's Saint Hall had been established for over 100,000 years. Although it had encountered many dangers and had even fought against Saint-class factions, it had never suffered such a great loss. It had actually been attacked, and even the main palace, which was very important to the Sorcerer's Saint Hall, had been destroyed. Why wouldn't I dare? Do you think the Sorcerer's Saint Hall is still the Sorcerer's Saint Hall of the past? Without a rule-class elite, your Sorcerer's Saint Hall is at most slightly stronger than the most powerful families. Gray looked at the Sorcerer's Saint Hall leader fearlessly and sneered. Chapter 776. You don't have a law-level expert? The Temple Lord was shocked. His secret had been exposed, and his pupils constricted. However, he stopped himself and looked at Gray with a gloomy expression. Who ordered you to slander the Shaman's Saint Hall? Is it the Space-Time Temple? Slander? You should know very well whether I'm slandering you or not. Gray sneered. The Saint of the Shaman Saint Hall hasn't appeared for a long time, right? Temple Lord, is what he said true? Some elders of the Shaman Saint Hall worriedly asked the Temple Lord. Just as Gray had said, the Saint of the Shaman Saint Hall had not appeared for hundreds of years. In the past, they did not think much of it. After all, with a saint's lifespan of tens of thousands of years, a few hundred years was nothing. However, after hearing Gray's words, they could not help but feel worried. Don't be deceived by him. The saint only returned a few years ago. He just didn't appear in public. The Lord of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace snorted coldly. You should know very well whether I'm lying or you're lying. Gray's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. None of the law-level experts targeted by the Saint Hunters have managed to escape. Are you saying that the law-level expert of the Shaman Saint Hall is an exception? What? The Saint Hunters targeted the Saint Hall? Some of the people from the Sorcerer's Saint Hall were puzzled, while others from the Sorcerer's Saint Hall were shocked. They had heard of the rumors of the Saint Hunters and naturally knew how terrifying they were. It was rumored that none of the law-level experts targeted by the Saint Hunters had managed to escape. And if he didn't die, how did the Book of Laws of the Shaman Saint Hall fall into our hands? Gray continued. You haven't seen the real Book of Laws for many years, right? However, don't worry. Not long ago, I returned the Book of Laws for your dead law-level expert. Book of Laws. This time, even more people's expressions changed. They hadn't seen the Book of Laws for a long time. When they learned blood arts, they only saw a copy of the Book of Laws. Moreover, this copy of the Book of Laws wasn't complete. Many of the blood arts and secret arts that should have existed were missing. If the saint had not appeared for a long time, it could barely be explained. However, it was difficult to explain the fact that the Book of Rules was incomplete. It would have been fine if Gray had not mentioned it, but now that it was mentioned, he felt that something was wrong. However, how could something as precious as the Book of Rules be lost? Unless a saint had unfortunately fallen outside, and the Book of Rules happened to be in the hands of a saint. Don't be deceived by him. The only reason I put away the Book of Laws is to prevent it from being stolen. An old man with sparse hair said coldly. A powerful aura emanated from his body, and he was only slightly weaker than the Lord of the Shaman Saint Hall. He should be one of the other major figures besides the Lord of the Shaman Saint Hall. That's right. Don't be deceived by him. Lord Saint is fine. An extremely tall, middle-aged man spoke. His aura was also powerful. He was also a major figure besides the Lord of the Shaman Saint Hall. Apart from that, there were 5 other experts whose auras were no weaker than the 2 of them. They looked at Gray furiously. You should know very well whether I'm deceiving you or not. Of course, what happens to your Shaman Saint Hall has nothing to do with me. Gray's gaze was fearless as he faced off against the rule-level experts of the Sorcerer Temple. However, the law experts of your Shaman Saint Hall shouldn't have schemed against us and cursed us before they died. Hand over the method to remove the curse, or I'll tear down your Shaman Saint Hall today. He had just been probing to see if there were any low-ranked experts in the Shaman Saint Hall. Judging from the reactions of these people, there should be no low-ranked experts in the Shaman Saint Hall. In that case, there was nothing to be afraid of. How arrogant! The Hall Master of the Sorcerer Saint Hall rebuked angrily. He had already lost a lot of face when Gray and the other 4 had escaped. Now that Gray had actually said that he wanted to tear down the Sorcerer Saint Hall, he was instantly enraged. Arrow. His voice had the same rhythm as before. The sky and the earth moved with his voice. In the sky, countless arrows appeared. The arrowheads shone with a cold light. The bodies of the arrows were pitch black. They whistled and attacked Gray at a speed 10 times faster than the speed of sound. They covered a large area where Gray was. Each of these arrows was capable of piercing through a mountain peak. He knew that Gray had teleportation powers. Even if he was locked in a cage, he could teleport and escape. He used his strongest skill to try and kill Gray with 1 hit. Humph! Gray laughed with disdain. The attack speed of a level 6 Annihilation class giant was very fast, but he had time rule power and space rule power. He could teleport and escape if he wanted to. However, he had no intention of dodging. He was there to suppress the Shaman Saint Hall and force the Shaman Saint Hall to hand over the method to remove the curse. Dang! 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 The arrows that could have pierced through a mountain first hit the invisible barrier before hitting him. Like raindrops hitting glass, the arrows collapsed and scattered. The terrifying power that could have pierced through a mountain did not cause any damage to the invisible barrier. He dares to provoke the Shaman Saint Hall. He has angered the hall leader. This person is going to die. How? Seeing the Shaman Saint Hall leader angrily attack and use his strongest attack, many of the Shaman Saint Hall students and elders were excited. It was like they could see Gray's body being destroyed. In the next moment, they shockingly discovered that the scary attack that could kill them hundreds of times did not do anything to the young man. The young man did not even move. He blocked the full power attack of the hall leader. Space barrier? The Shaman Saint Hall leader looked glum. After all, he was a level 6 Annihilation class giant. He immediately determined the power Gray was using and found the weakness of the power. Arrow. He roared again, and a large number of arrows appeared in the sky again. However, these arrows did not appear in one direction. Instead, they appeared in many directions. Gray's front, back, left, right, and even up and down were all arrows. Arrows that were terrifying enough to pierce through a mountain peak attacked Gray from all directions as soon as they appeared. The air was filled with terrifying whistling sounds. Dang, 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 dang. The arrows that came from Gray's front, back, left, and right hit the invisible barrier before hitting Gray. There was a scary explosion. Even the ground was affected. Many palaces were cracked. Many of the Shaman St. Hall students were blown away. In the end, they were unable to do anything to Gray. They could not move forward. They all collapsed and disappeared. Did you really think I was talking nonsense with you? Gray laughed disdainfully. He looked at the Shaman St. Hall leader with disdain. He could only create one space barrier at a time. If he wanted to create a complete sealed space, he had to use the space barrier ability 6 times. Under normal circumstances, he did not have the time to do that in front of a giant elite. However, before the fight, he had chatted with the Shaman St. Hall leader for a long time. That time was enough for him to create a sealed space. The life and death of a rule-class elite had nothing to do with him. He threw out the bomb that the rule-class elite was dead and purposely talked to him to buy time. The space barrier ability is known for its strong defense. Attack with me. We will break the space barrier together. The Hall Master of the Sorcerer St. Hall had an ugly expression on his face after failing to do anything to the other party twice. He immediately looked at the other 7 great leaders and gave his orders. Yes, Hall Leader. The other giants knew about the special characteristics of the space barrier. They immediately attacked together. Suddenly, 8 level 6 annihilation class powers attacked Gray. There was a sea of fire that looked like a burning cloud. There was a giant bird beast that was created by the power. There was a giant meteorite. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Suddenly, a terrifying explosion appeared around Gray. With the 8 giants working together, it was a power that could destroy the world. The powerful shockwave caused the surrounding palaces to collapse. Some of the weaker disciples of the Shaman St. Hall who were closer spat out blood and flew backward. Even some of the elders retreated pathetically. He should be dead this time, right? Almost everyone looked at the center of the explosion that was covered in smoke. With the 8 giants working together, no one could stop them. Lin Huang would definitely die. However, when the smoke dissipated, everyone's expression changed. The 8 giants, including the Shaman St. Hall leader, could not help but change their expressions. He's not dead, and he's not even injured. In the air, Gray's figure was not injured at all. Even his clothes were not messed up. The violent shockwave seemed to be in a different dimension from him. It did not affect him at all. Is this the rumored space barrier with the strongest defense? The Shaman St. Hall leader's expression was ugly. The Shaman St. Hall was far away from the space-time temple. Although he had heard of the strong defense of the space barrier, he had never come into contact with it. He originally thought that with the 8 giants, they would be able to break the space barrier. Unexpectedly, with the 8 of them working together, they still could not break the space barrier. Hand over the method to remove the curse, or I'll flatten the Shaman St. Hall today. Gray's gaze swept across the faces of the 8 leaders, including the Lord of the Sorcerer Temple. He coldly repeated what he had just said. It was the same words, but the effect was completely different. Previously, his words had angered the Shaman St. Hall leader, causing him to attack him in anger. Now, his words had made the 8 giants, including the Shaman St. Hall leader, fearful. Although they were angry, they could not hide the fear in their eyes. Arrogant, the power of a saint-level force is not something you can imagine. The Shaman St. Hall leader was so angry that he was trembling. There were flames of anger burning in his eyes as he roared. Everyone attack with me. Chapter 777. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Boom. Hearing what the leader of Sorcerer Holy Hall said, all the people of Sorcerer Holy Hall attacked angrily. Thousands of scary attacks were launched. The light was so bright that people could not open their eyes. It was like the most beautiful fireworks in the world. They exploded around Gray, creating a destructive wave. It was beautiful but also deadly. Even a level 6 annihilation class giant would not survive such an attack. The space barrier created by the space rule power was known as the strongest defense in the world. It was unique. Even under such an attack, it did not break. It had reached its limit. The strong space barrier started to ripple. It was like a piece of glass that was shaking violently. It was like it was going to shatter in the next moment. It's my turn. Looking at the densely packed group of people from the Sorcerer Temple surrounding him, Gray revealed a cold smile. Han's son used his space powers. Outside the space cage, a space crack that was a few hundred meters long opened up. The Rule-class bird-beast-controlled corpse came out of the space crack like a purple light. It was going to attack a 6th-tier Annihilation-class big shot. Oh no, seeing the Rule-class bird-beast-controlled corpse coming toward him, the level 6 Annihilation-class giant felt his hair stand on end. He felt a strong sense of danger. "Wall!" he shouted with a rhythmic voice. In front of him, a giant wall that looked like it was made of metal appeared out of nowhere. Retreat. The metal wall was a few hundred feet long and wide. It was 30 feet thick. It looked very solid. Even so, he still felt uneasy. He ordered the others to retreat while he quickly retreated. The next moment, his uneasiness was confirmed. Pooh! The 30-foot thick metal wall was pierced. The Rule-class bird-beast's giant body broke through the wall and rushed toward him. He only had time to put his hands in front of him to protect himself before he was hit. It was like he had been hit by a meteorite. With the sound of bones breaking, his hands were horribly broken. They were bent in an unnatural way. The scary impact went into his body. His insides were turned upside down. He spat out blood and flew backward. There were pieces of his organs in the blood. As a level 6 Annihilation class being, he was severely injured. The others behind him were even worse off. Pooh! 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 Under the impact of the rule-level bird beasts, the people from the Sorcerer's Saint Palace exploded into blood on the spot, leaving clouds of bloody mist in the air. With the rule-class bird beast's giant body as an area, a scary mark appeared. Everyone who was on that mark was killed. Even the Annihilation elites were unable to avoid it. Before they died, many people dodged in fear. Under the terrifying speed of the Rule-class bird beast, even a level 6 Annihilation-class giant would find it difficult to dodge, let alone them. They could only watch helplessly as the huge body of the Rule-level bird beast crashed into them, waiting for death with despair. It's a blood beast at the regulation level. Everyone cried out in horror as they stared at the clusters of bloody mist in the air that were formed by the miserable fresh blood. Some people's faces were filled with fear, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Some people were so frightened that they couldn't control their bodies and directly fell from the sky. A blood beast at the regulation level was comparable to a blood beast at the regulation level. Only a blood beast at the regulation level could be their opponent. Now, such a blood beast at the regulation level had appeared and attacked them. Fear filled their hearts. Even the level 6 Annihilation-class giants felt a chill in their hearts. Facing a blood beast at the regulation level, even they had no way of fighting back. Pooh! While they were in a daze, the blood beast at the regulation level returned. After leaving behind a lot of bloody mist, it hit another level 6 Annihilation-class giant and sent him flying backward. Retreat. Everyone below the level 6 Annihilation class, retreat. Seeing the clusters of bloody mist in the air again, the Sorcerer's Saint Palace leader's eyes were wide open. With his eyesight, he could see that this was a corpse beast at the regulation level that had been controlled by a corpse controlling ability. Even if it was a corpse beast at the regulation level, it was not easy to fight against it. Those below the level 6 Annihilation class had no right to fight against it. Prison. A rhythmic voice came from his mouth. It was like the sky and the earth were connected. A giant cage suddenly appeared around the bird beast at the regulation level. Pang! The bird beast at the regulation level was blocked. Its giant body was trapped in a giant cage. It was like a giant bird in a cage. Luckily, it has been trapped by the palace leader. Seeing that the bird beast at the regulation level was trapped, everyone in Sorcerer's Saint Palace let out a sigh of relief. The Sorcerer's Saint Palace leader's cage was created by rule power. They knew how strong its defense was. They used to think it was comparable to a space barrier. Although they no longer thought that way after seeing the powerful defense of a space barrier, they were still very confident in the cage. Can you block it? Looking at the trapped bird beast at the regulation level, Gray was not worried at all. He had a slight smile on his face. Even he was not confident that he could use a space barrier to block the bird beast at the regulation level. Catcha! The bird beast at the regulation level extended its sharp claws and grabbed the pillars of the cage. Then, it suddenly exerted force. There was a crisp sound. The pillars of the cage were torn apart. The giant claws swept horizontally. A few more pillars were broken. So, the bird beast at the regulation level rushed out of the cage and attacked another level 6 annihilation giant. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The giant who had been targeted by the bird beast at the regulation level and the other giants all tried to intercept the bird beast at the regulation level. However, when the attacks landed on the bird beast at the regulation level, they only scratched its skin. Resisting the attacks, the bird beast at the rule level approached the giant and slapped it with its claws. Catcha! It was unknown how many of the big shot's bones were broken as he flew backward. The bird beast at the regulation level stared at another giant. It turned into a purple light and attacked the giant. Puffed! The giant was hit by the wings of the bird beast at the regulation level. He immediately spat out blood and flew backward. In just a few short exchanges, for level 6 annihilation giants and Sorcerer St. Palace were injured. This was the power of a bird beast at the regulation level. Even if it was just a bird beast at the regulation level that did not have blood beast abilities and only had physical abilities, it still had such combat power. You deserve to die. Sorcerer St. Palace leader looked at Gray with bloodshot eyes. Although the people were injured by the bird beast at the regulation level, Gray was the one who had controlled all of this. Everyone back off. Once he made a decision in his heart, he ordered loudly. When they heard his orders, all the great leaders seemed to know what he was going to do. They supported their injured companions and quickly retreated. The other people from the Holy Shaman Temple who had already hidden far away also retreated once again under their orders. Buzz! A crystal staff appeared in the hands of Sorcerer St. Palace leader. The surface of the crystal staff was full of complicated patterns. After the crystal staff appeared, the veined patterns on its surface lit up. Huge veined patterns appeared on this mountain peak, as well as the surrounding 100 or so mountains. As the foundation of Sorcerer St. Palace, this place was not simple. Many rune matrices were connected to form a powerful attack pattern. Such a pattern was too powerful. While it hurt the enemy, it also hurt their own people. It would cause serious damage to Sorcerer St. Palace. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it would not be used. Now, it had reached a point where it had to be used. Buzz! Many lights gathered on the crystal staff. The crystal staff was filled with a dazzling and terrifying light. Whoosh! Sensing the terrifying means used by the Sorcerer St. Palace leader, Gray guessed that it would be very dangerous to let him attack. He did not care about the escaping giants and commanded the bird beast to attack Sorcerer St. Palace leader. However, just as the bird beast was about to approach Sorcerer St. Palace leader, a dazzling light shot out from the crystal staff and collided with the bird beast. Boom! A terrifying shockwave exploded. Gray's spatial barrier was violently shaken. All the palaces on the mountain were silently shattered. In the distance, the retreating Sorcerer St. Palace people at the back were instantly turned into a bloody mist. Hurting others and hurting oneself was the characteristic of such means. Chi! Under the terrifying light, the rule-level bird beast suffered a setback for the first time. Under the impact of the terrifying light, its huge body slid along the ground, and a huge shard wound appeared on the surface of its body as if it had been burned by a scorching high temperature. It's only slightly weaker than the bird beast. Seeing the huge wound on the bird beast's body, Gray's pupils constricted violently. The power of this attack should be comparable to the bird beast's. He had already used his alloy ability on the rule-level bird beast as soon as possible, turning its body silver gray. Its defense had been strengthened again on the rule-level foundation, but it had still suffered such heavy injuries. Its power was definitely not far from the rule level. As expected of a saint-level faction, even without a bird beast, they still have such means. Gray's expression became solemn. Whoosh! Another dazzling light appeared. However, this time, it was not directed at the bird beast, but at Gray. Whoosh! A terrifying sense of danger rose in his heart. Even the spatial barrier could not give Gray a sense of security. Without any hesitation, he accelerated with his time rule ability and teleported with his space rule ability. He disappeared from where he was. Crack! The dazzling light collided with the spatial cage. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the spatial cage before it finally shattered with a crack. Not only that, but the terrifying power broke through the spatial cage and spread forward. Some unlucky people from the Sorcerer's St. Palace who had retreated in this direction did not have time to react under the terrifying light. They did not even have time to panic before they were vaporized. The strongest defense, the spatial barrier, was broken. It was not that the spatial barrier was weak, but Gray's current realm was weak. Fortunately, Gray had made a prompt decision and teleported away. Otherwise, he would have died without a doubt. Chapter 778. I want you to be buried with them. Seeing the people of the Sorcerer's St. Palace vaporize under the attack, the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace's eyes twitched, and his expression was ferocious. He looked around and quickly locked onto Gray, who had teleported. Dazzling light condensed on the crystal staff, and he was ready to attack Gray again. Your opponent is not me. In the sky, Gray relied on his greenish-black wings to float in the air. He sneered at the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace who wanted to attack him. Whoosh! The next moment, the rule-level bird beast appeared. Its huge body covered the sky and blocked the sun as it attacked the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace. Although it was injured, it obviously would not lose its combat strength so easily. Moreover, with the huge size of a rule-level bird beast, although the injuries on its body looked extremely serious, compared to its huge size, they could only be considered ordinary injuries. The crystal staff was indeed powerful, but the rule-level bird beast's alloy transformation ability was also extremely powerful. Gray did not think that it would be weaker than the other party's methods. Whoosh! No longer caring about Gray, the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace pointed his crystal staff at the rule-level bird beast. A dazzling light as thick as a mountain enveloped the rule-level bird beast. Whoosh! It flapped its wings downwards, and the rule-level bird beast's huge body seemed to have lost gravity. It suddenly rose and brushed past the dazzling light. The dazzling light, which was as thick as a mountain peak, crashed into a distant mountain peak. The palace on the mountain instantly disappeared, and the surface of the mountain also disappeared, revealing the crystal mountain full of patterns. The mountain emitted a dazzling light, and the patterns on the surface were all shining. It was one of the formation patterns that supported the crystal staff. Back then, the founder of the Sorcerer's St. Palace had discovered these mountains formed by the crystal room materials and used them as a foundation to establish the Sorcerer's St. Palace. Whoosh! After dodging the dazzling light, the rule-level bird beast's huge body exploded with terrifying speed. In an instant, it appeared behind the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace. Its huge claws, which were comparable to large excavators, grabbed at the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace. With the combat strength of the rule-level bird beast, the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace would definitely be seriously injured like the other giants if he was caught. Wong. He did not turn around, but the huge commotion behind him had already alerted the temple master of the Sorcerer's St. Temple to the attack. Cold sweat rolled down his forehead, and the crystal staff in his hand trembled. The dazzling light that was wrapped around the staff suddenly spread out in a circle with him as the center. Boom! The rule-level bird beast's huge claws collided with the circular light, causing a powerful shockwave to erupt. The rule-level bird beast's huge body was pushed back, but the circular halo also dissipated. Its power was much weaker than before. Although the dazzling light that spread out in such a way protected the temple master of the Sorcerer Temple, its power was still spread out. Whoosh! With the halo blocking him, the Lord of the Sorcerer's St. Palace finally reacted. He turned around, and a dazzling light that was as huge as a mountain attacked the bird beast. However, The rule-level bird beast once again relied on its speed to brush past the dazzling light that was as huge as a mountain and dodged it. His Highness has taken the initiative to use the crystal formation, but it still can't do anything. Only after retreating more than 20 miles away did he finally avoid being affected. However, in the process of retreating, many people from the Sorcerer's Saint Palace had already been affected and died. The people who were lucky enough to survive looked at the battle in the distance. Their faces were filled with shock, worry, and anger. They were shocked by the combat strength of the attacker, worried that the Temple Master would not be a match for him, and angry at the disaster that he had brought to the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. Just what is going on? How did the Sorcerer's Saint Palace provoke such a powerful enemy? A seriously injured giant was filled with fear as he asked in confusion. When Gray attacked, he had been cultivating in seclusion. He had no idea what had caused the conflict. That's right. Just how did we provoke such a terrifying monster? A giant whose arms were completely broken was in so much pain that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. He also asked in confusion. Hesitation flashed across the faces of the man and woman who had been with the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. In the end, the woman spoke. That young man and his companions accidentally obtained the Book of Rules of Curses and sent it back under the influence of the Saint's curse. The Temple Master was worried that the contents of the Book of Rules of Curses would be leaked, so he was prepared to detain them. However, that young man had the ability to teleport and escaped with his companions. After that, the Temple Master was prepared to arrest him, but he did not expect him to turn back. He must have realized that the curse was not removed, so he returned to ask for a way to remove the curse. After hearing the woman's words, the surrounding giants frowned. One of them, an old man with a medium build, said unhappily, "The Temple Master has gone too far." The other party kindly returned the Book of Rules of Curses. Not only did he not thank him, he was even prepared to kill him. Now, he has provoked such a powerful enemy for the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. No force could be united. The old man with a medium build had always been at loggerheads with the Temple Master. The reason was that the two of them had fought for the position of Temple Master, but had failed. Now that there was a chance, he naturally would not forget to attack the other party's prestige. The Temple Master has indeed gone too far. With someone taking the lead, there would naturally be others who would agree. A giant who had almost died from injuries was full of resentment. Just as this group of people was discussing, the battle in the distance had reached its climax. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace attacked continuously. Rays of dazzling light that were as large as mountains attacked one after another. However, the bird beast relied on its speed to dodge them. Even if it was hit sometimes, it was only slightly injured. On the other hand, the Sorcerer's Saint Palace suffered. Large areas of the palace were destroyed, and the surrounding area was filled with traces of destruction. Whoosh! After dodging a dazzling light that was as large as a mountain, the bird beast suddenly appeared above the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. Its huge claws slammed down on the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. The Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace pointed his crystal staff above his head. A dazzling light shot up, but the bird beast's figure flashed again and appeared on the other side of the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. It attacked the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace from the other side. Swoosh! The Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace was already prepared. He turned his crystal staff, and a dazzling light pillar attacked the bird beast in that direction. Boom! The bird beast could not dodge in time and was hit. A serious wound appeared on its huge body. However, just as it was hit, its huge wings slapped the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. Puffed! The bird beast was sent flying. The Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace also spat out blood and was sent flying. The hand holding the crystal staff was broken, and the crystal staff flew out. Whoosh! Gray teleported and appeared, grabbing the crystal staff in his hand. The bird beast, which relied on its instincts to fight, naturally did not know how to exchange injuries. The reason for this was naturally because it was under his command. The effect was better than he had imagined. Not only was the temple master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace injured, but the crystal staff was also sent flying. There's indeed a special activation method. With the crystal staff in hand, Gray wanted to activate it, but he realized that he could not activate it at all. Knowing that he could not activate the crystal staff without a way to activate it, he simply ignored it and threw the crystal staff into a spatial item. The other party had lost the crystal staff and could no longer unleash that powerful combat strength. Although the bird beast was injured, its combat strength was not great. The outcome of this battle was destined. Oh no, the temple master is in danger. Seeing that the temple master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace was in danger, the eyes of the remaining giants flickered. They rushed toward the battlefield, but surprisingly, their speed was much slower than usual. It was only half of their usual speed. Knowing that the person who had a grudge against Gray was the Hall Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Hall, and that they had lost their most powerful technique, they naturally had some ideas. With this thought in mind, they all lowered their speed in a tacit understanding. Poof! Even if these people did not reduce their speed, they might not be able to save the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace, let alone reduce their speed. The bird beast that was sent flying flew up and pounced toward the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. After taking an attack from the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace, a huge sharp claw pierced through the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. Cough, cough. The Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace spat out blood. His face was as pale as paper. After struggling for a while, he finally died due to his heavy injuries. It was only at this moment that the other 7 giants finally arrived. What? Do you still want to fight? Or do you want to avenge him? After putting the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace's body into the space, Gray coldly smiled at the 7 of them. He knew very well how fast a 6-tier annihilation class could reach. Seeing the speed of the 7 of them, he could already guess what the 7 of them were thinking. Mister, this is a misunderstanding. The Temple Master was in the wrong first. He deserved to be killed by you. Of course, we do not want to avenge him. Plus, after knowing what the Temple Master did, we are very ashamed. He actually bit the hand that fed him. This is really damaging to the reputation of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace. Even if he does not die this time, we will work together to remove him from his position as Temple Master. Among the 7 of them, an old man with a medium build quickly said, "That is your Sorcerer's Saint Palace's business. I do not care. You should know how to remove this curse, right?" Gray revealed his left wrist and gestured for them to look. However, his eyes were cold. Once they said no, he would definitely order the rule-level bird beast to tear the 7 of them apart without hesitation. The reason he did not kill the 7 of them was because they were giants and had a lot of knowledge. They knew many secrets of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace and might know how to remove the curse. We know. Don't worry, mister. We have the formula to remove this curse." Feeling Gray's murderous intent, the 7 of them could not help but break out in cold sweat. The old man with a medium build quickly said, "Okay, you go and prepare. Get someone to make the medicine immediately. As for you guys," Gray looked at the 6 people other than the old man with a medium build. "One of you, take me to the treasure trove." Since he had already reached this step, what he wanted was not only the medicine to remove the curse. Although the Sorcerer's Saint Palace had declined, it was still a Saint-class faction. Its collection must be very rich. Most importantly, it must have the blood of a rule-class blood beast. Chapter 779. The treasure vault of the Sorcerer's Saint Hall was located at the main peak where Gray and the Lord of the Sorcerer's Saint Hall had fought. However, the entire hall had been destroyed, revealing the Crystal Mountain. Fortunately, as the treasure vault was heavily guarded, it was built in the depths of the Crystal Mountain and was not damaged in the battle just now. Avoiding the traps, Gray and one of the leaders of the Sorcerer's Saint Hall walked towards the treasure vault. He was not worried that he would be tricked by the other party. Although he could not use the rule-level bird beasts in such a narrow place, he still had the space barrier and the ability to teleport. The other party would not be able to trick him. If the other party was smart, he would not have used traps to trick him. Gray and the big shot arrived at the treasure vault of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace without any obstructions or traps along the way. The huge treasure vault was extremely wide and had a total of 3 levels. It was like an inverted steeple. The lower one went, the more valuable the items were. He did not stop at the first level. To be able to be collected by the Sorcerer's St. Hall, even if it was only the first level, it was definitely not cheap. However, Gray's current standards were too high, and he did not care for these expensive items. He went all the way down and went down 2 levels. It was only when he reached the last level, which was the 3rd level, that he finally found something that he was interested in. There were many precious magic herbs, many of which could be used to make level 5 magic potions. There were even 3 precious herbs that could be used to make level 6 magic potions. While the leader of the Sorcerer's St. Hall was heartbroken, Gray took all the magic herbs that were level 5 and above. As he continued to search, he found many magic weapons. The lowest grade was at the gold level, and there were more than 10 of them that were at the inherited level. He did not touch the gold level weapons, but did not let go of any of the inherited level weapons. He would not be courteous to the Sorcerer's St. Hall. Then, in one of the rooms, he found the blood of many blood beasts. There were many types of blood beasts that he had never seen in books before. However, the blood beasts that he knew of were at the calamity level at the very least. This showed how precious the blood was. Where is the rule level blood beast blood? Gray looked at the leader of the Sorcerer's St. Hall and asked, "Over here." Although the head of the Sorcerer's St. Hall was unwilling, he still brought Gray to a crystal platform on the right. He only hoped that Gray would leave the Sorcerer's St. Hall as soon as he was satisfied. There were a total of 5 vessels on the crystal platform, and each vessel had a different type of blood beast carved on it. Black Devouring Dragon. Gray looked at the words engraved on the first container on the left. This was a type of rule-level blood fiend that he had read about in a book before. It possessed the Dark Rule ability, which was the polar opposite of the Light Rule ability. Just like the Light Rule ability, it was also composed of 5 elemental abilities, but it did not overlap with the Light Rule's 5 elements. If I consume it, although it won't give me a new law ability, it will complement the blood of the Light Law blood beast that I consumed previously. It will allow all 10 elements to undergo a second metamorphosis, increasing the speed of my metamorphosis to a terrifying degree. By now, Gray could basically confirm that the blood he had swallowed was the blood of a blood fiend of the Light Law. The metamorphosis ability could increase the speed of metamorphosis. For example, when he consumed the blood of the Light Law blood beast earlier, the metamorphosis of the 5 elements that made up the Light Rule was faster than the other elements. If he could consume the blood of the Black Devouring Dragon, the metamorphosis of the other 5 elements would be increased as well. All 10 elements would undergo a second metamorphosis, achieving a terrifying metamorphosis speed. Therefore, the blood of the Black Devouring Dragon was very useful to him. It was a type of rule-level blood that he needed. Gold Fragment Beast. Gray looked at the second type of rule-level blood beast blood. It was a type of rule-level blood beast blood that he had never seen in a book. He looked at the head of the Sorcerer's St. Hall and asked, "What kind of ability is this rule-level blood beast?" This is a rule-level blood beast that possesses the Shatter Law. According to the records of the Sorcerer's St. Hall's library, this is the Shatter Law ability. It's a rule-level ability that has an extremely strong disintegration ability. It consists of wind, metal, earth, poison, and ice elemental abilities. After listening to the head of the Sorcerer's St. Hall's introduction, Gray felt that it was a pity. The Shatter Law ability was undoubtedly a rule-level ability that was extremely destructive. Given the crushing characteristics of this rule-level ability, it might have the ability to crush space barriers in a battle between people of the same level. Unfortunately, the uniqueness of his ability prevented him from possessing such a nomological ability. Moreover, the composition of his ability also overlapped with the light and darkness nomological abilities. After consuming the darkness nomological ability, all 10 elemental abilities would undergo a second transformation. There was no point in consuming such an ability to undergo a transformation. Combat Beast. Gray looked at the third type of rule-level blood beast blood. It was a type of rule-level blood beast blood that he recognized. This type of rule-level blood beast had the weapon law and could turn any part of its body into a weapon. It could also smelt sturdy metals into its body to possess extraordinary defense. The strongest person among the younger generation of the Sacred Weapon tribe, who had once fought Gray, possessed this ability. During the battle with Gray, his opponent had smelted an extremely high-grade, inherited weapon. Not only did he obtain a powerful defense, but he also used it to possess powerful combat strength. This type of rule-level ability was composed of weaponization, fire elemental, metal elemental, self-healing, and ossification. Due to the uniqueness of this ability, he would not be able to obtain this type of rule-level ability after consuming this type of blood. However, it would allow him to gain weaponization, self-healing, and ossification. If he was lucky enough, he might be able to form a new rule-level ability with his resurrection ability. Even if it did not form a new rule-level ability, it would increase the number of abilities. If he encountered other abilities in the future, the possibility of forming a rule-level ability would undoubtedly be greater. Flame Soul Beast. Gray looked at the fourth type of rule-level blood beast blood. It was also a type of rule-level blood beast blood that he had read about in a book before. This type of rule-level blood beast had the Flame Law ability, which was similar to the Fire Elemental ability, but was superior in form. It possessed a higher temperature than ordinary Fire Elemental abilities. Not only that, but it also had a burning effect on the soul. To a certain extent, this was an ability that had an extremely strong restraining ability against the weapon law. Although the weapon law could give the user a terrifying defense, it was only a physical defense and could not enhance the soul's defense. This ability that could burn the soul could burn the soul within. As long as the soul was destroyed, no matter how strong the physical defense was, the user would inevitably die. This type of rule-level ability was composed of the elemental Fire Elemental and Wood Elemental Soul Fire, Soul Wave, and Soul Poison. It was also a type of rule-level ability that Gray could not obtain due to its uniqueness. However, it did not mean that this ability was useless to Gray. Just like the Weapon Law ability, even if it was not useful, it could still increase the upper limit of his ability and increase the possibility of fusion into a rule-level ability in the future. Cursed Bird. Gray looked at the fifth type of rule-level blood beast. This was a type of rule-level blood beast that he had never seen in books before. However, its name gave him an inexplicable idea. He looked at the head of Sorcerer St. Hall with anticipation and asked, "What ability is this rule-level blood beast blood?" "This is the blood of a rule-level blood beast with the curse law." As expected, Gray's eyes lit up. The head of Sorcerer St. Hall's words had confirmed his guess. After seeing the word curse, he could not help but subconsciously associate it with the curse law. His guess was not wrong. This was indeed a blood beast with the curse law ability. The reason why he was so excited when he saw the blood of a blood beast with the curse law ability was because the curse law was composed of the soul types Soul Poison, Psychic Power, Psionic Power, Illusion, and Physical Demonic Sound. It was a type of rule-level ability that he could definitely obtain. He kept all 5 types of rule-level blood beast blood. He did not even let go of the gold fragment beast blood that he could not use. Although he could not use it, it was an extremely precious rule-level blood beast blood that had many other uses. Gray then left the Sorcerer St. Hall's treasure vault in satisfaction, leaving behind the head of Sorcerer St. Hall, who was in tears. Although Gray did not take many things, each of them was extremely valuable, especially the 5 types of rule-level blood beast blood. Its value could not be measured by magic power coins because no organization would sell such blood. After leaving the treasure vault, Gray teleported and appeared in a dense forest. He then threw the head of Sorcerer St. Hall's corpse out of thin air. There was a huge hole in the head of Sorcerer St. Hall's chest. Looking at the head of Sorcerer St. Hall's corpse, Gray sneered, "I won't let you off so easily." As his enemy, death was not the only ending. Even if he died, he had a way to revive him and enslave him for life. Buzz. Han Sun used his resurrection ability. A large amount of green mist floated over and wrapped around the head of Sorcerer St. Hall, turning the place where he was into a giant green cocoon of light. Half an hour later, the head of Sorcerer St. Hall stood up. The terrifying wound on his chest had recovered. His breathing and heartbeat had also recovered. He was alive again. Master Gray. Seeing Gray, the head of Sorcerer St. Hall bowed respectfully. There was no hatred in his eyes. There was only respect and fear. Yes. Gray nodded and said, Head of Sorcerer St. Hall, from today onwards, you will help me guard the Leopold family. After the Fergus family had been brought to the Leopold family, the safety of the Leopold family had become extremely important. Because of this, he had killed all the spies of the top families. He had always wanted to find a powerful helper to guard the Leopold family. The head of Sorcerer St. Hall, who was at the 6th tier of the Annihilation class, was an excellent choice. With him guarding, even if the strongest families attacked, they would not be able to hurt the Fergus family. As long as it was not a rule-level elite attacking, even if he could not defeat them, he could easily take the Fergus family and escape. He could even hold on until he arrived. The latest chapter of the Divine Blood Warrior came to the website. Chapter 780. After spending a day in the Sorcerer Saint Temple, the magical potion that Gray needed to dispel the curse was given to him by the middle-sized old man. As a potion master with poison abilities, it was very easy for him to confirm whether the potion was poisonous or not. After confirming that the potion was not poisonous, Gray swallowed a portion of the magical potion on the spot. After swallowing the MP potion, Gray clearly felt that his body was slowly becoming lighter. It was as if there was a mountain pressing down on him, and at this moment, this mountain was slowly moving away from him. About half an hour later, the blood-red snake pattern on his left wrist disappeared. His body became unprecedentedly light. Where even, Gray threw the crystal staff to the middle-sized old man and glanced at the remaining 7 leaders of the Sorcerer's Saint Temple meaningfully. He then teleported away from the Sorcerer's Saint Temple. He had killed enough people. A conservative estimate would put the number of people from the Sorcerer's Saint Temple who had died because of him in the hundreds. Furthermore, the chief culprit, the Lord of the Sorcerer's Saint Temple, had already received his due punishment. He did not intend to pursue the matter further. As for using his power to subdue the Sorcerer's Saint Temple and take them under his control, although he would be met with fierce resistance, he should still be able to do it. However, he did not intend to do so. The Sorcerer's Saint Temple was a saint-level organization that did not have a law-level powerhouse to hold the fort. He could almost imagine how the Sorcerer's Saint Temple would end up if news of his actions were leaked. His former enemies would definitely attack and destroy the Sorcerer's Saint Temple without hesitation. He did not have the ability to fight against a law-level powerhouse now, so he could only give up. This is the potion that can dispel the curse. After teleporting back to the Leopold family and secretly settling down the original Lord of the Sorcerer's Saint Temple, Gray released Sophia and the other 3 from the realm and gave them the potion to dispel the curse. The 4 of them drank the potion, and like him, the curse on their bodies was completely dispelled. Blanca and the other 2 heaved a sigh of relief when the curse was dispelled. They bade farewell and left. The exploration of the ancient ruins this time was not an ordinary kind of thrilling. They almost died under the curse, which made them endlessly shocked. As for how Gray forced the Sorcerer's Saint Temple to hand over the antidote to remove the curse, they were very curious. However, they could tell that Gray did not want to talk about it, so they did not ask. Sophia also stayed in the Leopold family for a few days before being sent back to the Space-Time Temple by Gray. Only in the Space-Time Temple could her strength rapidly increase. After sending off Sophia, Gray returned to the Leopold family. He entered the newly opened dimension and began to consume the blood to transform. Conservatively speaking, I should be able to obtain at least 1 rule-bending ability. Apart from the fragmentary gold beast blood, Gray looked at the 4 types of rule-level blood beasts with anticipation. Currently, he had a total of 2 law abilities, the Law of Time and the Law of Space. These 2 law abilities did not overlap with the Law of Curse. Therefore, conservatively speaking, he would be able to gain at least 1 new law ability. Let's start with the Dark Devouring Dragon Blood. Taking out a portion of the Dark Devouring Dragon Blood, Gray drank it in a single gulp. Immediately, a strange change occurred to him. His entire body felt like it was being corroded by something unknown. Intense pain filled his entire body. He felt like he was being corroded and melted. Outside, a black light enveloped him. His body seemed to have become a black hole. With him as the center, all the light in the surroundings was devoured by the black light. The sun hung high in the sky, shining with dazzling light. However, the area within a few kilometers of him was gloomy, like it was raining. The lush vegetation in the surroundings all withered and died under the influence of the darkness. The laws of darkness were completely opposite to the laws of light. They were extremely corrosive and devouring. Derivative abilities often countered the laws of light's derivative abilities. If the laws of light represented the divine side, then the laws of darkness represented the dark side. Of course, there was no good or evil in the abilities. It all depended on the user. Although most of the Radiant Saint Temple cultivated the laws of light's blood techniques, what they did could not be called light. The fact that they could sacrifice a plane without any hesitation was enough to show how bloody the Radiant Saint Temple was. Over an hour later, the transformation ended and the abnormality disappeared. Gray carefully sensed the changes in the abilities in his body. Sure enough, I didn't obtain the laws of darkness. The result was as he expected. Due to the uniqueness of the ability, he did not obtain the laws of darkness. Even with his transformation ability, he could not break this iron law. After resting for a while and feeling that his body was fine, he began to consume the second type of blood beast. After consuming it, I should be able to obtain the laws of curses. For the second type of blood, he chose the blood of the cursed bird that possessed the laws of curses. He had experienced the laws of curses very well. Some of the derivative abilities were extremely strange. Even if a person died, the ability could still be triggered under appropriate conditions. They had almost died from this strange ability. If it were not for the fact that he had obtained the corpse of the laws of curses, which greatly increased his battle prowess, he might not have been able to force the Sorcerer's Saint Temple to hand over the method to remove the curse. Even now, when he thought about this strange ability, he could not help but feel scared. However, the more strange the ability was, the more excited he was. After all, the next person to feel scared was his enemy. After drinking the blood, Gray's body began to tremble inexplicably. A strange sound rang out from his body. This sound had an inexplicable rhythm and had an inexplicable connection with the outside world. As soon as it appeared, it immediately caused the outside world to tremble. It was like an inexplicable note that could stir the laws. It caused the already fixed laws of the world to change, causing an inexplicable tremor. An hour later, this change disappeared. Gray carefully sensed the changes in his bloodline. A moment later, he opened his eyes and left the plane. He teleported and appeared in the Forbidden Forest. Enhanced, standing in the middle of the forest, Gray took a deep breath and spoke. A rhythmic sound rang out from his mouth. It was a little blurry, as if there was an echo. As this sound came out, the ubiquitous laws were touched and pried by him. A blood-red light appeared out of thin air and fell on him. His body was enveloped by the blood-red light. Then, a strange feeling spread throughout his body. He felt that he had an inexhaustible amount of energy in his body at this moment. Boom! A punch blasted out, immediately triggering a terrifying fist wind. A large forest in front of him was shattered under the violent fist wind brought about by his punch. Whoosh! Then he stomped on the ground, and his body appeared in front of a huge mountain like a phantom. Just by running, he had already caused the surrounding trees to sway. This speed was only slightly slower than when he used the laws of time to accelerate. Crack! With a punch, the entire huge mountain was shattered under his punch, turning into gravel. However, he did not feel any pain from his fist. His defense had also been greatly improved. Whoosh! An ordinary wind blade was shot out with a wave of his hand, but it turned into a few hundred meters long. It left a smooth cut along the way and extended out of his line of sight. Such a power if one did not consider the time decay characteristic of the laws of time, was on par with the laws of time. Boom, boom, boom. Gray ran, punched, and used his abilities. After a few minutes, the red light that enveloped his body disappeared. The strange enhancement on his body also disappeared. He stopped and looked at the forest that he had destroyed wantonly. His eyes were filled with shock. Although I've only obtained one type of derivative ability, this derivative ability is much more valuable than multiple derivative abilities combined. After obtaining the curse law, Gray's situation was extremely special. He had only obtained one type of derivative ability, which was this strengthening ability. However, even though it was only one type, in Gray's opinion, it was enough to match several types of derivative abilities. The Temple Master of the Sorcerer's Saint Temple had two derivative abilities. One was to create a rain of arrows, and the other was to create a strong cage. However, to Gray, the value of these two derivative abilities could not be compared to the enhancement ability. The enhancement of the enhancement ability included speed, strength, defense, and the Blood Beast ability. It was enough to increase his abilities in all aspects, making the increase in his abilities much more powerful than the other derivative abilities of the laws of curse. Moreover, this ability is the most suitable for me. Gray's eyes were filled with excitement. He had already mastered the laws of time and the laws of space. In terms of powerful techniques, he did not lack them. The space barrier could give him a powerful defense, and the rule of time ability could give him terrifying speed and powerful attack power. Adding another powerful technique to his arsenal did not mean much to him. However, the enhancement ability derived from the laws of curse was obviously different. It could be further enhanced on the basis of the original ability and obtain a combat power that was much stronger than a single law ability. For example, under the enhancement ability, he could use the acceleration of the laws of time, the time decay of the laws of time, and the space barrier of the laws of space. He would obtain a stronger combat power. Enhance. The rhythmic voice was heard again. Gray was once again enveloped by the red light. Under such circumstances, he used the laws of time to accelerate. Boom! His body shot out at a terrifying speed. There was a loud roar in the air. Just by running past him, the surrounding area was swept up by a level 12 typhoon. The earth, rocks, and trees were all blown away. It is faster than the 6th level of the Annihilation class. Gray was sure that his speed had definitely exceeded the 6th level of the Annihilation class. It might have even reached the Law level because his speed was no weaker than the Law level Bird Beast. Chapter 781. Schwa. Under the strengthening mode, the time rule power was used. A purple light as thick as a mountain appeared and swept forward. Chi. Without a sound, a life-forbidden zone that was thousands of meters wide and dozens of miles long appeared. It was like the end of the world. In this area, all the plants, beasts, and blood fiends were dead and annihilated. There was no sign of life, not even a skeleton. Even the sturdy stone mountains collapsed one after another, raising a cloud of dust into the air. Nothing could withstand the ravages of time, not even the lifeless earth and rocks. Its power should be comparable to the crystal staff. Gray was sure that the power of such an attack was no weaker than the crystal staff's power with the runic matrix of the Sorcerer Temple. Without a doubt, under the strengthening mode, the Time Rule Power's time corrosion ability had also received a terrifying increase. A space barrier appeared. It was as invisible as before. It was not too thick, but it surprisingly gave Gray a feeling that it was extremely sturdy. It was as if there was an indestructible barrier there. It gave him the confidence that even if he faced a Rule Power Elite's attack, he would be able to withstand it. It did not make sense. Schwa. The purple light that could create a life-forbidden zone of dozens of miles crashed into the space barrier. Pung. The purple light and the invisible space barrier were in a stalemate. In an instant, the space barrier experienced tens of thousands of years. Under such a long time, even an inherited weapon would have decayed and disappeared. In the end, when the purple light completely dissipated, the space barrier did not disappear. Even after tens of thousands of years, it was still indestructible. Its speed is beyond the 6th level of the Annihilation class. Its destructive power is comparable to the Crystal Staff. Its defense makes the Time Rule power, which is comparable to the Crystal Staff, helpless after deactivating the Strengthening mode. Gray took a deep breath to calm his excitement. Under the Strengthening mode, his various abilities had increased by several times. His overall combat power had definitely exceeded the 6th level of the Annihilation class. A few days ago, in the battle with the Sorcerer Temple, if he had such combat power, he would not have needed to use the Rule Power Bird Beast. He would have been able to wipe out the Sorcerer Temple, which did not have a Rule Power Elite. At this moment, he might still be some distance away from the Rule rank, but he was definitely very close to it. If his realm increased by 1 or 2 levels, his combat strength would probably be comparable to the Rule rank. After resting for a day, Gray took out the blood of a 3rd type of Rule-level Blood Fiend and swallowed it. From the 3rd level of Magic Light to Annihilation class, every level up was enough for him to undergo 2 metamorphoses. With all of that added up, his fitness had a very strong endurance. He could withstand the metamorphosis of consuming blood multiple times. Because of that, he dared to consume Blood Beast blood for the 3rd time in a short amount of time. This time, the blood he took out was the blood of the Flaming Beast, which contained the rules of flame. Gray did not need to think about the Law of Flames. The uniqueness of his ability meant that he would not be able to obtain the Law of Flames. However, there was a possibility of combining it with the original ability in his body to form a new law ability. After swallowing the blood, intense pain filled Gray's entire body. He felt that his body and soul were burning. In fact, that was the case. Both his body and soul were undergoing metamorphosis because the Law of Flames had the dual characteristics of burning matter and soul. In the outside world, black flames burned outside his body. As soon as his sweat appeared, it was evaporated by the flames. The terrifying temperature spread in all directions. The area within a few miles was filled with terrifying heat. The plants burned directly under the high temperature. After a long time, the metamorphosis ended. After resting for a long time, Gray recovered and checked the changes in his ability. I didn't obtain a new rule. The result of the check disappointed him slightly. The Law of Flames had only increased the number of his abilities. He had not obtained a new rule ability. Although he had already obtained the Curse Law ability and his combat strength had greatly increased, how could he not want to obtain more rule abilities? However, luck was not on his side this time. He had not been able to obtain a new rule ability. Whether or not I can obtain a new rule ability depends on the blood of the Soldier Beast. After resting for a few hours, Gray took out the blood of the 4th type of Rule-level Blood Beast. This 4th type of Rule-level Blood Beast was a Soldier Beast. It had the Soldier Law ability, which was a mixture of 5 types of abilities: Soldier Transformation, Bone Transformation, Self-Healing, Fire, and Metal. Without hesitation, he endured the smell of iron and drank it in one gulp. As expected, intense pain descended on his body. His entire body felt as if it was being burned by flames. At the same time, there was pain from all parts of his body, as if he had suffered a heavy blow. Sometimes it appeared on his head, sometimes on his torso, sometimes on his legs, and sometimes on his hands. It was as if there was an invisible hammer pounding on his body. The surface of his body had turned crimson red, like a piece of red-hot iron. Sweat kept dripping down his body, and his hair was already drenched in sweat. Not only that, but a strange scene appeared. From time to time, a part of his body would slightly sink in, as if it was being hammered by a hammer. In this state, he was like the embryo of a weapon, being burned by the flames and hammered by the hammer. After a long time, this state left, and the transformation was finally over. After taking a bath and feeling refreshed, Gray carefully examined the changes in his body. A moment later, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. With a wave of his hand, he summoned the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. He had not used the Bramble Calamity Crocodile for a long time. As his strength increased, he rarely used this disaster-level blood beast corpse control. After all, his current combat strength had far surpassed the level of a disaster-level corpse control. Pooh! With a slash of a wind blade, a long wound appeared on the bramble calamity crocodile's body. After that, Gray didn't do anything. He just quietly looked at the wound. At this moment, something unexpected happened. At the bramble calamity crocodile's wound, the scratched skin and internal muscles were rapidly healing. In the end, it was completely healed. During the entire process, he did not use his reverse nurturing ability, but the wound was strangely healed. The bramble calamity crocodile had a strange self-healing ability. The self-healing ability has indeed been integrated into the resurrection ability system. Seeing this scene, Gray's eyes flashed with the color of as expected. When he sensed the changes in his ability, he discovered that the self-healing ability of the Law of War had been integrated into the resurrection ability system. After testing it, this was confirmed. A fourth law ability. Gray could not hide the surprise on his face. The resurrection ability system originally had 4 abilities: corpse control, specter control, super memory, and puppet. With the addition of the self-healing ability, it now had 5 abilities. In other words, this was already a law ability. After the law of curse, he now had a 4th law ability. Let's call it the puppet law. After thinking for a moment, Gray named the 4th law ability the puppet law. He had never seen the resurrection ability system in any book, so he naturally did not know what kind of law it was. However, the main characteristic of this ability was that it could use the corpses or souls of other creatures as puppets, so he named it the puppet law. With the self-healing ability, as long as I do not suffer fatal injuries, I can fight while recovering. My overall combat strength will undoubtedly increase. There was no doubt that the integration of the self-healing ability would definitely increase the combat strength of the puppet law ability. In the past, although it could use the reverse nurturing ability to repair and control corpses or resurrect people, there were conditions after all. It needed to be under the circumstances where there were plants around. In battle, it was very difficult to fight and recover injuries at the same time. After all, with his current combat strength, just the aftermath of the battle was enough to make the surrounding plants disappear. However, now that he had the self-healing ability, he could quickly recover his injuries while fighting. As long as he did not suffer fatal injuries, he could continue to fight. His overall combat strength had obviously increased. After testing the self-healing ability's recovery speed, he discovered that the self-healing ability's recovery speed was extremely fast. As long as he did not suffer fatal injuries, his injuries would be healed in a few minutes at most. Gray became even more satisfied. 2 days later, in a pavilion next to a training field in the Leopold family, Gray and the Fergus family, who had just finished their training, sat in the pavilion and chatted. The Fergus family had been in the Origin world for almost a month, but he basically did not have much time to accompany them. Now that he finally had some time, he took the opportunity to check on their training progress. The conditions for training in the Origin world are indeed much better than in a plane. Bernal sighed softly. Not long ago, his realm had risen from a mad level to the barbarian level, becoming a powerhouse who could be conferred the title of Marquis by a kingdom in a plane. Originally, he did not have much hope for the regent level, which could be considered legendary in a plane. However, it now seemed that the regent level was not impossible. Perhaps the regent level was not his limit. It's precisely because of this that the Origin world can give birth to so many powerhouses beyond imagination, and even have a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. Gray agreed. Can people really live for tens of thousands of years? Sarah and Babala were astonished. Although they had heard of such rumors, they still did not dare to believe it was true. Yes, as long as you can reach the rule level, you can have a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. Gray nodded affirmatively. It's rumored that every rule-level powerhouse has one or even multiple rule-level abilities. What are rule-level abilities? Bernal asked curiously. They had been in the Origin world for almost a month, and everyone had learned many things that they had never come into contact with before. He had heard rumors of rule-level powerhouses. It's an ability that is formed by a mixture of 5 types of abilities. It has undergone a qualitative transformation and possesses unimaginable methods. Gray explained. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. His expression did not change, as he muttered to himself inwardly. It's finally begun. Chapter 782. After bidding farewell to the Fergus family, Gray went to a secluded place and teleported a few times. He appeared in a forest with steep terrain. Master Gray. Seeing Gray appear, an extremely skinny man wearing a silver metal mask walked over and greeted Gray respectfully. It was the former Shaman Temple Lord. Because many people recognized him, Gray had him wear a mask and give up his original name. He was called Ingi. Gray nodded slightly and looked into the distance. More than 10 miles away, there was a ring-shaped mountain range made up of crystal mountains. That was where the Shaman Temple was located. At this moment, a massacre was taking place on the mountain peaks. There were a total of 3 parties fighting. On one side, there was the symbol of a giant purple bird. The bird had no hair, but purple scales. On the other side, there were messy yet orderly lines. Staring at the symbol for a long time would make one's vision blur. On the other side, there was the symbol of a giant crimson ape. The ape's hair stood on end, looking extremely violent and bloodthirsty. Who would have thought that the Chaos Temple and the Eternal Holy Nation would team up? Rumor has it that the 2 factions are on bad terms. It seems that the saying that there are no eternal enemies and no eternal friends is true. Gray's lips curved into a mocking smile. Among the 3 factions, the one with the giant purple bird symbol was from the Shaman Saint Temple, the one with the messy line symbol was from the Chaos Temple, and the one with the giant ape symbol was from the Eternal Holy Empire. At this moment, the Chaos Temple and the Eternal Holy Empire were working together to attack the Shaman Saint Temple. Why are there only 4 heavyweights in the Shaman Temple? Even though he was more than 10 miles away, Gray could still clearly see the battle in the distance. What surprised him was that after the death of the Temple Master of the Sorcerer's St. Hall, there should have been 7 great leaders left, but only 4 of them were besieged. 3 heavyweights brought a group of disciples and retreated before the Chaos Temple and the Eternal Holy Nation attacked. He replied, though they'd moved very stealthily, and even the Chaos Temple and Eternal Sacred Nation spies hadn't noticed them. There was no way they could escape the eyes and ears of a heavyweight like him. Looks like the Sorcerer's St. Palace had already expected this, so they let a group of people leave in advance. That's right, if even I can think of this, it's impossible that the Sorcerer's St. Palace didn't think of it. These 4 big shots must have stayed behind willingly to attract the attention of the 2 Saint-rank forces. Gray did not delve too deeply into the matter. He vanished from where he was, and when he reappeared, he was on the 3rd floor of the Shaman St. Hall's treasury. Sure enough, many things had been taken away. Upon arriving at the 3rd floor, Gray discovered that the 3rd floor was much emptier than when he had first come. Many of the precious items had disappeared, which further proved that the Shaman St. Hall had already anticipated this outcome. Since the Sorcerer Saint's palace is about to be destroyed, I won't hold back. As the space opened, Gray swept everything he saw into the open space. With the ability to open space, the space that others were worried about was not enough, but it was completely useless for him. Very soon, the 3rd floor of the Shaman Saint Palace's treasury had been emptied. He went up to the 2nd floor and continued sweeping. After more than 10 minutes, the 2nd floor was emptied. Just as he was about to sweep the 1st floor, a voice rang out. We've discovered the Shaman Saint Palace's treasury. Leave a group of people to guard this place with me. The rest of you, quickly informed the palace master. Some forces had already arrived at the 1st floor of the treasury and discovered this treasury. Gray didn't come face to face with these people. Instead, he calmly teleported and disappeared from the 2nd floor of the treasury, reappearing a dozen miles away. He had no intention of clashing with the 2 Saint-rank forces. Unlike the Shaman Saint Palace, the Chaos Sacred Palace and the Eternal Holy Empire had low-ranked experts overseeing them. In particular, the low-ranked expert from the Chaos Sacred Palace had only appeared a few years ago. He did not want to be unlucky. Although he was already extremely powerful and was only a step away from the low-ranked, it would be best if he did not have to clash with the Saint-rank forces. After more than an hour, the massacre stopped. The Crystal Mountains were filled with corpses. Blood stained the Crystal Mountains and flowed down from them. It looked extremely horrifying. Facing the alliance of the Chaos Sacred Palace and the Eternal Holy Empire, the remaining people from the Shaman Saint Palace, including the 4 big shots, had all died in battle. The big shots from the 2 Saint-rank forces rushed toward the treasury. Unfortunately, when they saw the 2nd and 3rd floors of the treasury, their expressions turned ugly. The rewards from destroying a Saint-rank force were not much better than destroying a powerful family. This made the 2 Saint-rank forces very angry. The Shaman Saint Palace was indeed prepared. They cleaned everything up, passed down the order. Hunt down the people from the Shaman Saint Palace. Don't let any of them go. The 2 Saint-ranked forces naturally would not let this go. They both passed down the order to hunt down the people from the Shaman Saint Palace who had escaped. After a few hours, the people from the 2 Saint-ranked forces left after searching 3 feet of the Shaman Saint Palace, but to no avail. As they were very dissatisfied with this harvest, the corpses of the people from the Shaman Saint Palace were left where they were and allowed to be exposed to the sun. Since you are all dead, then I will make use of the trash. Seeing the 2 Saint-ranked forces leave, Gray quickly appeared in the ruins of the Shaman Saint Palace. His body flashed. He grabbed the 4 big shots' corpses and teleported away with BZZT. He used his resurrection ability. After more than 2 hours, 3 people appeared in front of him. They were the 3 big shots from the Shaman Saint Palace. One of the big shots seemed to have his head injured, so he could not be resurrected. From now on, you will be called Ing 2, Ing 3, and Ing 4. Gray gave each of them a silver mask and named them. Yes, the 3 of them respectfully answered. Although they still had many memories, they were no longer the big shots from the Shaman Saint Palace. They were just Gray's shadow guards. Gray nodded with satisfaction. The Shaman Saint Palace had been destroyed. He had not only gained a lot of wealth, but he also gained 3 more 6th-tier Annihilation elites. Now, even if he did not do anything himself, he could still wipe out any of the strongest families. With 4 6th-tier Annihilation elites, the Leopold family was impregnable. Unless a Saint-class faction attacked, no faction would be able to return alive. He went to the Urgash family and took back the magic potion that the Urgash family had asked Master Roman to make. He then went to the Time and Space Temple to take back the 6th-tier potion that was made from the red fire fruit. Gray started to focus on his training. Now, he had many training resources. He even had 2 6th-tier support potions. He needed to turn these resources into battle power and use them to increase his level. Inside the cabin, Gray took out a very precious crystal bottle that contained a potion. Inside the crystal bottle, there was half a bottle of golden liquid. The liquid was golden. It was like melted gold. Sometimes there was a golden light. This was the 6th-tier potion that Gray had obtained from the underwater ruin. It was the gold light potion. This potion was able to speed up the metamorphosis of gold element powers. It could make the metamorphosis that would have taken hundreds of years to complete in a very short amount of time. A potion like this was so precious that it could not be measured by money. It was a priceless item. Almost no faction would trade something like this. Even if they did, they would trade something else for something that was priceless. He uncorked the bottle. A medicinal aroma spread out. It was a pungent smell at first, but when he smelled it, there was a different kind of smell. With just a whiff, Gray actually felt his strength faintly increase. One could imagine how strong the medicinal effect of this potion was. Gulp! Gray was afraid the potion would take effect, so he quickly drank it. Suddenly, a hot feeling went down his throat and into his stomach. It spread from his stomach to every part of his body. It gathered at his heart. Yangming easily sensed the transformation of his blood power. Even though it was a very small transformation, he could still feel it. It was like he was in the middle of a second metamorphosis. His blood power was changing all the time. The metamorphosis was more obvious. He could feel it easily. At this speed, I should be able to complete the metamorphosis of my gold element power in a month. After observing for an hour, Gray knew how long it would take for him to go from the 1st tier of Annihilation class to the 2nd tier of Annihilation class. The 6th tier potion was a precious potion that was useful to rule class elites. Although it was a very small portion, it contained a special substance that could speed up the metamorphosis of his blood power. There was a lot of it. If it was triggered in an instant, even with Gray's fitness, he would explode. He would become a pile of minced meat. Fortunately, the special substance was stable. It could be slowly absorbed according to the body's condition. It would not explode in an instant. Especially after being made into a potion, the stability was controlled. It was even less likely for that to happen. Of course, that was under normal circumstances. If there were some special circumstances, such as a fierce battle, the special substance could be triggered and explode. The person who consumed it would instantly explode. As a master pharmacist, Gray knew the characteristics of level 6 potions, even though he had never consumed level 6 potions before. This was also why he had to wait until he was done with all his work before taking this potion in his own plane in the form of closed-door cultivation. A month later, Gray had been practicing in his dimension for a month. Suddenly, his body had a big reaction. In his body, the blood power that was originally blood red had turned completely golden. It was like liquid gold, and the color was extremely pure. When the power of blood turned into this golden liquid, the golden liquid suddenly began to move within Gray's body on its own without Gray's control. It began to move according to a certain pattern. Looking at its path, it formed a complicated metal pattern. It was the metamorphosis secret of the gold element that he had practiced. Chapter 783. As the power of the golden blood automatically operated according to the metamorphosis secret method of the gold element, an indescribable vibration spread out with a rhythm. Under this vibration, Gray's physical fitness was rapidly improving, increasing at a terrifying rate with every passing second. Not only that, but his soul was also rapidly improving, and he was more resistant to illusory soul attacks. The practice of Annihilation class was to let the soul, body, and blood power evolve. After the evolution, the other two would level up. The secret technique he practiced was to evolve his blood power. Now that his blood power had evolved, it started to evolve his soul and body. After a few hours, the blood power stopped moving. His body and soul were the same as his blood power. They had reached the second stage of Annihilation class. Now, his level had reached the second stage of Annihilation class. After leaving the plane, Gray met up with the Fergus family and relaxed for a day. Then, he returned to the plane to prepare for his next training. Closing his eyes, he observed the blood power in his body. The golden blood power became a giant golden whirlpool where his heart was. He observed it carefully. Soon, he found a trace of green blood power in the golden whirlpool. The blood power is evolving to green. That means the second evolution is a wood element power. After confirming the transformation ability of the second metamorphosis, Gray's eyes revealed a thoughtful look. Under normal circumstances, I should practice the wood element secret technique. I should let the second evolution and the secret technique complement each other. That way, I can get twice the results with half the effort. But I have the fire potion made from the red fire fruit. It can quickly complete the fire element's evolution. After thinking for a while, Gray made a decision. He gave up on the wood element secret technique and chose to practice the fire element secret technique. With the fire potion, the evolution of his fire element power would be faster than the second evolution of his wood element power. So, even if his fire element power was not in the second evolution, he still chose to evolve his fire element power. Gray had once cultivated a fire attribute secret art before, so he was able to use it with ease and proficiency. After confirming that the fire element secret technique had become his body's instinct, Gray took out the fire potion. The crystal bottle was around 10 centimeters tall. Inside it was half a bottle of black liquid. It was the fire potion. Uncorking the bottle, the fragrance of the medicine wafted into his nose. He drank it in one gulp. It was as if he had swallowed a mouthful of chilly water. The burning heat slid down his throat, through every part of his body, and finally gathered in his heart. Under the effects of this potion, the power of blood began to turn purple, and the rapid transformation of the fire ability had officially begun. 1 month later, It's at least 2 to 3 times slower than the metamorphosis of the metal element. Gray checked on the transformation of his blood force and realized that only 1/3 of his blood force had turned purple. It would take him about 3 months to complete the transformation of his fire force. Although the metal element had already undergone a certain degree of metamorphosis before taking the potion, it was still impossible for it to take as long as the fire element. The metamorphosis of the fire element was obviously not as fast as the metal element. It should be the effect of the second metamorphosis. In such a situation, Gale felt that it should be due to the influence of the second transformation. The second metamorphosis should not only increase the speed of metamorphosis, but also increase the absorption speed of the corresponding auxiliary medicine. Because the metamorphosis ability was different from the second metamorphosis ability, the absorption speed of the medicine did not increase, and the metamorphosis speed suddenly slowed down. Looks like in the future, unless it's absolutely necessary, it's best to combine the second transformation ability with the metamorphosis secret technique of the corresponding ability. Learning from this lesson, Gray concluded, just as Gray was immersed in cultivation, several 100,000 kilometers away, the main hall of the Radiant Saint Palace suddenly emitted streaks of platinum light. Streaks of platinum light shot into the sky one after another, dazzling and dazzling. It made the Crystal Palace seem extremely sacred. The sky was originally dark blue, but under the platinum light, there were actually streaks of rainbows that intertwined with the platinum light, making it seem like a dream. In the Crystal Palace, a figure shrouded in platinum light floated into the sky and finally stopped in the sky. He did not use any ability, but he was able to hover in the sky quietly, as if he should have the authority to fly. As he hovered in the sky, streaks of platinum light shone from his body like a platinum sun, intertwining with the original sun in the sky. Within the Radiant Saint Palace, everyone, including the powerhouses who spent most of their time in seclusion, emerged from their cultivation rooms and looked at the figures shrouded in platinum light. Their gazes were filled with shock, excitement, and ecstasy. Today was destined to be engraved in the history of the Radiant Saint Palace, because this was the day of the Great Birth. It was not just the Radiant Saint Palace. Even in places tens of thousands of kilometers away, pairs of eyes seemed to have sensed something and looked over. In a courtyard in the depths of the space-time Saint Palace, an old man appeared out of thin air. He then took a step and appeared in the sky, floating in the sky without being affected by gravity. The old man's face was old, and he seemed extremely ordinary, but his eyes were extremely strange. They were pitch black like two black holes. From so far away, he obviously could not see the resplendent platinum light, but he could sense the intense resonance of laws. Having experienced it before, he obviously understood that it was caused by someone breaking through to the realm of laws. Tens of thousands of kilometers away, a black-robed, skinny old man shot into the sky like a streak of black light. He stood in the sky. All the light was absorbed by him involuntarily, and the sky immediately darkened. 2 saints in one hall. Sensing the resonance of laws from the direction of the Radiant Saint Palace, the skinny old man understood what it meant, and his face sank. He was the current saint of the Darkness Saint Palace, and the Darkness Saint Palace he belonged to had always treated the Radiant Saint Palace like fire and water. Now that the Radiant Saint Palace had 2 saints in one hall, he could imagine that the Darkness Saint Palace would not have an easy time in the future. It was not just the Spacetime Saint Palace and the Darkness Saint Palace. In the distance, a few other Saint-tier organizations also sensed the resonance of laws, and their expressions varied. The resonance of laws lasted for half an hour before settling down completely. The leader of the Radiant Saint Palace withdrew his platinum light and gently landed on the ground. Congratulations to the leader for breaking through the shackles and achieving the realm of laws. Seeing him land on the ground, a large group of people immediately surrounded him. Among them were the 12 pillars of the Radiant Saint Palace that were widely known to the outside world, as well as the Holy Maiden and a few elders who were closer to the front and were about to become pillars. The leader of the Radiant Saint Palace had a calm temperament. Even after becoming a powerful being of the realm of laws, his expression remained indifferent. After nodding slightly at the crowd, he looked at Deputy Leader Cosmo. I've already achieved the realm of laws, and I won't be in this position for too long. I'll be stepping down soon, so you must be prepared to take over. Yes, leader. Deputy Leader Cosmo replied rather excitedly. He was excited that another powerful being of the realm of laws had been born in the Radiant Saint Palace, and he was also excited that he was about to take over the position of leader. Saint Samuel hasn't sent back any news yet? No, the saint should still be in the Void Zone. He hasn't received a reply. Deputy Leader Cosmo shook his head. If that's the case, I'll do it myself. Killing intent appeared in the eyes of the leader of the Radiant Saint Palace. Even though he had become a powerful being of the realm of laws, he could not help but feel fearful when he thought of Grey Fergus, who possessed dual powers of laws. If he allowed Grey Fergus to grow and break through the shackles to achieve the realm of laws, it would be a terrifying disaster for the Radiant Saint Palace. Although he had already achieved the realm of laws, if Grey Fergus also achieved the realm of laws, he would probably be able to catch up or even surpass him very quickly. Do you know where he is now? He appeared in the Radiant Saint Palace 2 months ago, but then he disappeared. There's still no news of him. Deputy Leader Cosmo said with a frown. Find him. Ask the Sacred Eye clan to search for him. We must find him. Leader, wouldn't it be too costly to ask the Sacred Eye clan to search for him? Deputy Leader Cosmo hesitated slightly. The Sacred Eye clan was a saint-level organization that existed in the form of a clan. This organization grasped the laws of eyes and was extremely skilled at searching. They were renowned for their tracking abilities in the Origin world. Even if they were hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, it would be difficult for them to escape their tracking. Because of their reputation, many organizations came to them, and they used tracking as an important source of income. Of course, the price of the information they sold was extremely high. Even the lowest level of information was enough to make a peak clan bleed, and some important information was sold at astronomical prices. Even saint-level organizations would frown. It was obvious that the price of information about a chosen saint like Grey Fergus, who grasped dual powers of laws, would be extremely high. They would definitely have to pay quite a hefty price. You underestimate the threat of dual powers of laws too much. The leader of the Radiant Saint Palace shook his head and said sternly, as long as he can break through the shackles, he will become the greatest enemy of the Radiant Saint Palace. If we're not careful, the entire Radiant Saint Palace will be destroyed. We can't be stingy with this matter. We must find him before he matures and kill him. Yes, Deputy Leader Cosmo replied sternly. Everyone else was solemn as well, especially the saintess who clenched her fists. Her face was filled with humiliation, reluctance, and shock. She was truly unwilling to accept her defeat to Grey twice in a row. She had already treated him as her greatest enemy, and she thought she had already attached great importance to him. She never thought that the leader of the Radiant Saint Palace, who had already become an expert of laws, would still be so wary of him. The potential he displayed had probably exceeded her previous estimates. Chapter 784. It took me 3 months. After taking the fire potion, Grey spent 3 months to complete the transformation of his fire element. He went from the 2nd level of Annihilation class to the 3rd level of Annihilation class. Compared to when he took the Golden Light potion, it took him 2 months longer. Fortunately, the transformation was complete. The special substance in the potion was completely absorbed. It was no longer like a bomb. If it was stimulated, it would explode. Grey finally understood why the Annihilation class creatures like to isolate themselves from the outside world and shut themselves away to train. The special nature of the Annihilation class potions meant that they had to train in a stable environment. Walking out of the plane and returning to the Leopold family, Grey called for Fod and Ken Shah. What happened in the past 3 months? Grey looked at the two of them and asked. He had been cultivating in seclusion for 3 months, completely isolated from the world. It was as if he had lost touch with the world. He needed to know what had happened during these 3 months and what was related to him. A rich gemstone mine was discovered 2,500 miles away from Leopold City. There was a dispute with a big family, but it has been suppressed. The first to speak was Kensha. She organized her words before speaking. In the Leopold family, Gray had given her the responsibility of managing the Leopold family's business, which was trading. Not bad. Gray nodded slightly and then looked at Fod. What about you? Nothing big happened, Fod said. The Chaos Holy Palace and the Eternal Holy Kingdom are still hunting down the remaining members of the Shaman Holy Palace. They even have a bounty on them. Gray had given him the responsibility of dealing with the outside world. For example, he had to deal with the big families and gather information. In the past 3 months, the outside world had not changed much. The Chaos Holy Palace and the Eternal Holy Kingdom were still hunting down the remaining members of the Shaman Holy Palace. The Leopold family received a search order from the Chaos Holy Palace almost every month. The two sacred factions had even put a bounty on them. Regardless of whether they caught them or provided clues, they would be rewarded handsomely. The two saint-ranked organizations probably thought that the remaining members of the Sorcerer's Saint Temple had a large amount of wealth, which was why they were willing to pay such a huge price. Guessing that he was the cause of all this, a sliver of guilt flashed through Gray's heart. However, he immediately wiped it off. With his relationship with the Holy Shaman Hall, it was already good enough that he did not destroy the Holy Shaman Hall with his own hands. Taking some things was nothing. I wonder where the remaining members of the Sorcerer's Saint Palace are hiding. Even with the combined efforts of two saint-ranked forces, they were unable to find them. Curiosity flashed in his heart. Gray could not help but think of the coastal area of the South Sea Territory. Could the remaining members of the Sorcerer's Saint Temple be hiding on one of the coastal islands? The sea realm was so dangerous that the various factions had scarcely explored it. If the enemy hid in an island, it would be extremely difficult for the Chaos Temple and Eternal Sacred Nation to find them. Forget it, this has nothing to do with me. Shaking his head, Gray tossed this thought to the back of his mind. The grudge between him and the Holy Shaman Hall was already settled. Whether they lived or died had nothing to do with him. Waving his hand to dismiss the two of them, Gray found the Fergus family and checked on the changes in the Fergus family over the past 3 months. After Bernal, Sarah had reached the barbarian realm. Her talent for cultivation was not bad, so her progress was not surprising. If it was not for the fact that it was difficult for her to settle down and cultivate, the first person to break through to the barbarian realm would not have been Bernal, but her. Barbara had finally reached the murderous realm. Unlike Sarah, she was very hardworking when it came to cultivation. However, her talent was limited. Even with an endless supply of supplementary cultivation resources, she had still spent many years to reach the murderous realm. However, Gray did not mind. She had taken the longevity elixir and had 100 or 200 years more lifespan than the average person. As his strength increased, he could definitely find the dragon turtle elixir that had a better effect of prolonging her lifespan. Bernal's wife's situation was similar to Kenz's. Her talent for cultivation was average. Other than that, Bernal's 2 children were still young and had not started to cultivate blood skills. However, they had been using precious medicines to strengthen their bodies. Their bodies would be able to withstand the bloodline before they turned 15. They had a few more years of cultivation time than others. This was the reason why the children of the top families in the source world were generally stronger. Geoffrey's Sacred Eye was in a huge palace that numbered less than 10 even in the Sacred Eye clan. Recently, he had been very irritated. He was an expert of the Sacred Eye race who had reached the 6th stage of the Destruction Realm. His status was only second to the saints and temple leaders. His status in the Sacred Eye race could be said to be second only to a few people and above everyone else. Over a month ago, the Radiant Saint Temple had visited and asked them to search for Gray Fergus's whereabouts. The Sacred Eye race had some understanding of this person. They knew that he was related to the Space-Time Temple and that he had mastered 2 laws. As a result, they had offered an extremely high price. However, the Radiant Saint Temple had agreed without any hesitation. With such a great reward, The few giants of the Sacred Eye race who possessed powerful searching abilities were all tempted. They all wanted to take on the mission. In the end, he had taken the mission. Originally, he thought that he could easily find traces of Grey Fergus with a rule of eyes that he had mastered. However, the result greatly surprised him. After over a month, he still could not find any traces of Grey Fergus. It was as if Grey Fergus had vanished from the source world. He could not find any traces of him at all. The other giants who had not taken on the mission naturally did not forget to ridicule him. This put him in a very bad mood. Today, he used the rule of eyes to search as usual. Open! With a low roar, the red line between his eyebrows suddenly split open, revealing a golden eye. The golden eye shone with golden light and easily penetrated the hall, looking tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of miles away. His body slowly turned as he searched in all directions. Found him! Suddenly, his face was filled with astonishment. He originally thought that he would not find anything like the previous month. However, he was surprised to find that this time, he did not find nothing. A young man had appeared in front of his eyes. The young man had black hair and blue eyes. He was dressed in noble attire and had a very unique temperament, calm and mysterious. Just from his temperament, he could already feel that this young man was not simple. He was indeed worthy of being a rare person who had mastered 2 laws. He was indeed extraordinary. He is... Suddenly, he muttered in surprise. After staying in the Leopold clan for a day, Grey continuously teleported to the space-time temple, preparing to meet with Sophia. However, he discovered that Sophia was in seclusion, so he did not disturb her. Just when he was about to leave the space-time temple, a disciple of the space-time temple found him and said that the vice-temple master had invited him. Temple Master Philip. Under the guidance of the temporal temple's disciple, Grey met the temporal temple's vice-temple master Philip in a courtyard. He was middle-aged, but he had a head of white hair and gave off a sense of vicissitudes. Grey had a rather good impression of him. Their conversation last time had been very pleasant. Sit. Philip gestured for Grey to sit, but there was a trace of worry between his brows. Just when Grey was hesitating about whether he should ask or not, he said solemnly, "Just 2 months ago, the temple master of the Radiant Saint Hall comprehended laws." What? Grey's face was suddenly shocked, and he almost stood up from his seat. The shock of this news was no less than an earthquake for him. The Radiant Saint Hall already had 1 expert of laws. Now that a second one had appeared, it meant that the Radiant Saint Hall had 2 saints. It was possible to imagine just how powerful the Radiant Saint Hall would be with 2 saints. You have to be careful. With your potential, the Radiant Saint Hall will never let you go. Unless it's absolutely necessary, it's best if you don't leave the space-time temple. The Vice-Temple Master warned solemnly. I understand. Grey nodded solemnly. His relationship with the Radiant Saint Hall was truly like fire and water. Now that the Radiant Saint Hall had gained another saint, their strength had surpassed the space-time temple. They probably no longer had any misgivings about him. It was completely possible for them to send experts of laws to hunt him down. After understanding the recent movements of the Radiant Saint Hall, Grey left the residence of the Vice-Temple Master Philip. The Radiant Saint Hall had always been a mountain that weighed down on him, and now the mountain had become even heavier. The Radiant Saint Hall has become even more powerful. Fortunately, I haven't remained stagnant either. My strength has increased as well. The powerful Radiant Saint Hall made Grey feel extremely pressured, but for some reason, it also made him feel excited. For months ago, after grasping the laws of curses and obtaining the ability to strengthen, his battle prowess had skyrocketed, nearing the level of the realm of laws. After 4 months, his cultivation had increased from the first layer of the destruction grade to the 3rd layer of the destruction grade. His battle prowess had definitely increased once more. It was completely possible for him to break through and reach the realm of laws in one go. If it were an older expert of the realm of laws, it's very likely that they wouldn't be my opponent. However, it's not like I'm powerless against a newly advanced expert of the realm of laws, like the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. A sliver of confidence appeared in Grey's eyes. Indeed, he had not reached the realm of laws, but he had grasped many abilities of laws. The various abilities of laws were completely capable of closing the gap between him and the realm of laws. If only my cultivation could increase by 1 or 2 more levels, then it'd be possible for me to kill even experts of the realm of laws. It's a pity that I don't have any more level 6 magic potions that can accelerate the transformation. It'll be a little difficult for me to increase my cultivation in a short amount of time. Right, although I don't have any level 6 supplementary potions, I still have 3 level 6 magic herbs. Although they're not the main ingredients for the supplementary cultivation potions, Gray's eyes suddenly lit up. He thought of a way to obtain level 6 supplementary cultivation potions. Precious items like level 6 supplementary cultivation potions could not be purchased. However, if he used precious items of the same level to exchange for them, it was not impossible. Chapter 785. Gray was in the Time and Space Temple. If he wanted to get a level 6 support medicine, the best place to do so would be the Time and Space Temple. With the Time and Space Temple's resources, they might have level 6 support medicine. But I did not know which elder is in charge of the resources. Gray raised his eyebrows. Although he had become an honorary elder of the Time and Space Temple, he rarely lived in the Time and Space Temple. He did not even know all 10 of the big shots in the Time and Space Temple, let alone an elder in charge of resources. He looked around. He wanted to find a Time and Space Temple student to lead the way. Soon, he had a playful smile. He walked in a certain direction. Congratulations, Brother F.A. for reaching the 2nd level of Annihilation class. With Brother F.A.'s 2nd level of Annihilation class, even among the core students, he should be at the top. Of course, with Brother F.A.'s power, he should be able to compete for first place. A few Time and Space Temple students were walking down the gemstone-studded hallway. One of them was a brown-haired young man who was surrounded by everyone. His status was the highest among them. It was F.A. Last time on the Rune ship, he had been scared. He thought it was someone with no background, so he wanted to use his power to punish him. He wanted to make him stay away from Sophia. He did not expect the other to notice. His identity was not ordinary. Even the deputy leader had been alerted. He had personally come to invite him to the Time and Space Temple. Even the elder who had become a big-shot candidate in the Time and Space Temple could not afford to receive such treatment. One could imagine how scared he was when he saw the deputy leader appear and treat him politely. That fear reached its peak after he returned to the Time and Space Temple. From the elder, he learned that the other had the power of time rules and space rules. He was already an honorary elder of the Time and Space Temple. Although he did not have any real power, his status was not lower than the elders. With the other's potential, even a big shot would have to give him face. If he wanted to punish him, even the elder could not protect him. He was very scared. He was afraid of revenge, so he chose to shut himself away and train. After half a year of isolated practice, he was very close to the 2nd stage of Annihilation class. He had broken through to the 2nd stage of Annihilation class. The revenge he was worried about did not come. He decided to go out and get some fresh air. Amidst the compliments, his tensed face relaxed, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. However, his expression changed abruptly at the next moment, and his face turned pale. He saw a black-haired young man walking over. This black-haired young man was the person he was most afraid of and didn't want to meet in the past 6 months. "What's wrong? Aren't you happy to see an acquaintance like me?" Gray looked at F.A. with a playful smile. No. A smile that was uglier than crying appeared on F.A.'s face. "That's for the best. I want to ask you for a favor. You won't refuse, right?" Gray patted the man's shoulder and negotiated with him. No problem." His body could not help but tremble as he hurriedly said. Under the astonished gazes of the Temporal Temple's disciples, Gray left under F.A.'s guidance. What kind of identity does he have to make Brother F.A.? He's so afraid. The two had already left, but the Temporal Temple's disciples were still in a daze. Their lofty image was disappearing, and they could not help but be curious. Brother F.A., who had an extremely lofty image in their eyes, was like a servant of the Temporal Temple, respectfully leading the way for a young man who had suddenly appeared. Just who was this young man? This is the place. With F.A. he's trembling lead. After 10 minutes, Gray arrived in front of a courtyard with many flowers and plants. Waving his hand to let F.A. he leave, Gray reported his identity to the servant in the courtyard. Gray naturally didn't like F.A. he. Fortunately, the other party was tactful and didn't harass Sophia again after that. Otherwise, he wouldn't mind changing him to someone else. Not long after reporting his identity, Gray was led into the courtyard and met with the elder in charge of the temporal temple's resources. The other party was called Tina, a middle-aged woman. Her skin looked extremely white and delicate. It was obvious that she had used an extremely expensive potion to moisturize her skin. It could be seen that she was a woman who paid great attention to maintaining her skin. No problem, the temporal temple does indeed have some level 6 supplementary potions. I can make the decision to exchange for them. After hearing Gray's intentions, the middle-aged woman readily agreed. Not to mention Gray's special identity in the temporal temple, there was no problem with the exchange itself. Exchanging level 6 supplementary potions for level 6 magical ingredients was not a loss. After all, a single level 6 magical ingredient could be used to make several level 6 potions. What kind of supplementary potions does the temporal temple currently have? Gray asked. This exchange was also not a loss for him. Although level 6 magical ingredients were precious, they were not what he needed and were useless to him. It was better to exchange them for level 6 supplementary potions that he could use. Currently, there are level 6 supplementary potions for poison, metal, ice, and fire. I want to exchange them for poison and ice. Gray's eyes lit up. His metal and fire elemental abilities had already evolved. Only the poison and ice elemental abilities were useful to him, so he only exchanged them for level 6 poison and ice elemental support potions. The exchange was quickly completed. In less than half an hour, Gray had obtained level 6 supplementary potions for poison and ice. Before leaving, he had a thought and asked the other party, Elder Tina, do you know who has level 6 supplementary potions for wood? Level 6 supplementary potions for wood? The middle-aged woman raised her eyebrows slightly. After thinking for a moment, she recalled something and said, the temporal temple refined a batch of level 6 supplementary potions for wood a few years ago, but they have all been used up. However, when we asked Master Bennett to refine them, we used a level 6 supplementary potion as a reward. Master Bennett might have a level 6 supplementary potion for wood. Master Bennett? I understand. I'll have to trouble Elder Tina this time. Gray thanked her and left. He was not unfamiliar with Master Bennett. Although he had never seen him, he had heard of him. This was because this person was the level 6 potion master who refined the flame potion for him last time. At that time, the other party's reward was also a completed potion. Looks like I have to meet this Master Bennett. Gray made up his mind. Now, the ability of the second metamorphosis was wood. If he consumed supplementary potions other than wood, it would take 3 times the time like when he consumed fire supplementary potions. Therefore, it would be best if he could get his hands on a level 6 wood-type auxiliary potion. Because of this, he had to pay a visit to Master Bennett. After finding out the city where Master Bennett was, Gray left the temporal temple and flew towards the city. Just as Gray was rushing towards the city, pieces of news about him were sent from the Sacred Eye clan to the Temple of Light through the magic script machine. He lives in the Chaos Territory hundreds of thousands of miles away. He has left the Chaos Territory and entered the Temporal Temple. He has left the Temporal Temple and is rushing towards the northwest. The news was like a live broadcast, recording Gray's movements completely. It had completely locked onto Gray. All of Gray's movements could not be hidden. This was the power of the Law of Eyes. He has left the Temporal Temple and is heading towards the northwest. Very good. Knowing that Gray had left the Temporal Temple, the Temple Lord of the Temple of Light stood up. His eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. The power of blood flowed into a purple bracelet on his right hand. Whoosh! His figure disappeared from the Temple of Light. When he reappeared, he was already in a sparsely populated place tens of thousands of miles away from the Temple of Light. There were no spatial coordinates on the ground. He did not use spatial coordinates to appear here. Teleportation ability. Yes, the bracelet on his hand had the ability to teleport. This was a magic weapon of a higher level than Gray's purple ring. Its teleportation ability was undoubtedly more powerful than spatial teleportation. It was precisely because of this magic weapon that the Temple of Light had been able to surround Gray so quickly at the exit of the plane. Teleportation ability. With a sneer, the Temple Lord of the Temple of Light hurried towards Gray's path. He had obtained this teleportation magic weapon from a transaction with the Temporal Temple tens of thousands of years ago. It was a transaction related to the destruction of a saint-level organization. In that transaction, the Temple of Light had been destroyed. The Temporal Temple, who had initiated the transaction, had paid several precious legacy weapons with space-time abilities. Roar. A day later, Gray suddenly heard the loud roar of a blood beast. Just from the sound alone, he could tell that the roaring blood beast was not ordinary. Flying forward, he saw the roaring blood beast. It was a huge humanoid beast. When it stood up, it was over 40 meters tall. There was a huge horn on its head, and its body was covered in blood-red hair that was several meters long. Its fangs were bared, making it look extremely ferocious. Why is there a unicorn war beast here? Gray was slightly surprised, and a sense of disharmony arose in his heart. The unicorn war beast was a disaster-level blood beast. It was an extremely powerful disaster-level blood beast. It possessed terrifying strength and defense. Apart from that, it also possessed fire and lightning abilities. It could be said to be one of the most powerful disaster-level blood beasts. It was rumored that this blood beast possessed the bloodline of the blood beast titan. However, due to the deterioration of its bloodline, it had degenerated from the rule level to the disaster level blood beast. Although there was no way to verify this, the unicorn war beast was still one of the most powerful disaster level blood beasts. Such a disaster level blood beast usually lived in the depths of the forest. It was truly unexpected for it to appear in a place like this. Chapter 786. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The unicorn warbeast's huge fist hammered city. This was not a small city. Judging from the area it occupied, it should be a city with a population of 1 million. At this moment, the city was covered in a light blue barrier. The light blue barrier protected the city and blocked the unicorn warbeast. However, the unicorn warbeast was too strong. Every time it hammered down, it felt like a mountain was smashing down. Under the continuous attacks, cracks appeared on the light blue barrier, and it looked like it would shatter at any moment. Not good. The defensive barrier can't stop it. Quickly report to the temple and ask for reinforcements. It's too late. Quickly run. The city was in an uproar and chaos. Panic voices could be heard everywhere. People were fleeing in fear. In the midst of the chaos, someone knocked over a fruit stall. Round fruits scattered all over the ground. Many people who were in a panic stepped on them and immediately fell to the ground. Someone startled the horse pulling the goods, causing the carriage to suddenly go on a rampage. A few people who couldn't dodge in time were sent flying, crashing into the walls of the nearby houses, their heads bleeding. Some people rushed to the tavern next to them in panic, knocking over many tables and chairs. This was a doomsday-like scene. Of course, to the residents of the city, it was no different from doomsday. If the light blue barrier was broken and a unicorn war beast entered the city, the entire city would be destroyed. If this wasn't doomsday, then what was? This city is directly under the control of the space-time temple. Although he had some doubts in his heart, Gray still flew towards the unicorn war beast. He had previously seen the temporal temple's map. According to the markings on the map, this was a city directly under the temporal temple. Since becoming an honorary elder of the temporal temple, the temporal temple had treated Gray well. Since he had encountered this, he naturally couldn't sit idly by. After all, from the current situation, this city might not be able to last until the temporal temple's reinforcements arrived. Kacha! Accompanied by a crisp sound, the light blue barrier that was already full of cracks finally couldn't bear it and completely shattered. Rumble. After shattering the light blue barrier, the one-horned battle beast punched towards the city wall. A huge hole appeared on the 100-meter high and 10-meter-thick stone wall. Boulders flew everywhere, and some unlucky people were killed on the spot by the boulders. Roar! It could already see the food behind the city wall. It cried out excitedly and took a step forward, wanting to step into the city wall. Humph! Gray snorted coldly. A purple light that carried a strange silence, like the light of the purple moon, fell towards the one-horned beast. When the purple light enveloped the unicorn, a terrifying change occurred. Chi-Chi, the huge body of the unicorn war beast, which was originally an adult, aged at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its muscles became loose, its hair fell off, its body became thin. In the blink of an eye, it had aged beyond recognition. However, the changes did not end there. His breathing and heartbeat stopped, and his old body lost its life. His flesh and blood quickly decayed, and in the end, all that was left was a huge skeleton that seemed to have experienced tens of thousands of years. Crack! The huge skeleton fell heavily, stirring up a cloud of dust. After it landed, it shattered into countless broken bones. Under the decay of time, even the toughest of bones had already decayed to the point that they were beyond recognition. One hit had killed a disaster-class blood beast that had mixed powers of 4 elements. This was the power of Gray, who had reached the 3rd level of the Annihilation class, using the Time Rule power. In the city, the noise suddenly quieted down. It went from being noisy to being so quiet that one could hear the falling leaves. Everyone's eyes involuntarily looked towards the gap in the city. The originally frightening giant beast had disappeared at that spot. All that was left was a huge but broken skeleton. A giant beast that made them feel hopeless had died, and it had died very thoroughly. Its flesh and blood had disappeared, and only its broken skeleton was left. After a while, the quiet atmosphere was broken. Everyone's faces looked like they had just survived a disaster. The shock on their faces turned into joy. Time Rule power. This is Time Rule power. Is the big shot from the Holy Palace here? No, he is not among the 10 big shots. A middle-aged man, who seemed to be the city leader, let out a sigh of relief. He looked at Gray, who was in the air, with confusion. He had used Time Rule power, but he was not among the 10 big shots. It might have been possible for him to be the holy son of the Time and Space Temple, but as far as he knew, the Time and Space Temple did not have a holy son. He stomped on the ground and flew up. He approached Gray, but Gray did not want to see him. He turned around and prepared to leave. Without thinking, Gray could guess what the man wanted to say. It was nothing more than gratitude. He did not need the man's gratitude. The main reason he saved the city was that the city belonged to the Time and Space Temple, and he had a close relationship with the Time and Space Temple. Seeing Gray turn around and leave, the middle-aged man opened his mouth to call out to Gray. At that moment, a scary change suddenly occurred. Light. The sky was filled with light. A thick platinum light, which was so bright that people could not open their eyes, fell from the sky. It enveloped Gray, the middle-aged man, and the entire city. Under the platinum light, the middle-aged man's figure disappeared. He did not leave behind even the slightest trace of his existence, dissipating like a ray of light. As for the people in the city, under the white gold light, they disappeared like the middle-aged man, not leaving behind a single trace. When they disappeared, they still had expressions of relief on their faces. They were rejoicing that they were still alive. However, reality was cruel. In the end, they did not survive. They all died under the platinum light that descended like divine punishment. It was not just them. Even the huge city was no exception. Whether it was the houses or the city walls, everything disappeared under the platinum light. In the end, with the city as the center, a huge crater with an area of several dozen square kilometers appeared. Nothing existed in this crater. Apart from the scorched earth, there was no trace of anyone who had once lived here. A white gold figure descended from the sky and floated above the huge crater. He looked indifferently at the huge crater that he had created with his own hands. 1,000,000 people had died under his attack, but his face did not change at all. He was still cold and indifferent. He was like a god who controlled divine punishment, emotionless. He actually escaped. There was finally emotion in his eyes. It was an extremely intense killing intent, like a landslide or a tsunami. The Radiant Saint Palace. More than 10 kilometers away, Gray looked at the godlike platinum figure floating in the air with an ashen face. At this moment, he was in a very sorry state. His originally black hair had disappeared, and there were burns on his face and body. The moment the platinum light fell, he used both the power of the laws of time and the laws of space to teleport away before the platinum light fell. The injuries on his body were caused by the high temperature before the platinum light fell. If he was really hit by the platinum light, he would not be injured but dead. In order to kill me, he did not hesitate to let 1,000,000 people die with him. By now, he had figured out the whole story. He also had an explanation for the strange feeling he had when he discovered the one-horned beast. This was a trap to lure him closer to the city. The one-horned beast must have been driven out of the forest by the figure shrouded in platinum light. His purpose was to lure him closer to the city, and the figure shrouded in platinum light had long been hiding in the clouds above the city, waiting for him to come and give him and the city a fatal blow. If it were not for the fact that his realm had increased, his reaction speed had become faster, and his teleportation speed had become faster by using the power of the laws of time and the laws of space, it would have been impossible for him to escape the terrifying attack just now. The other party had calculated his reaction speed, but what the other party did not expect was that, in just a few months, he had consecutively increased 2 realms, and his reaction speed had become even faster. However, although his reaction speed had become faster, he did not have the ability to save the 1,000,000 people. The only thing he could do was to protect himself. He really isn't scrupulous. Killing intent gushed out from Gray. He was not a soft-hearted person. The number of people who had died in his hands was not small, and he had long become indifferent to life and death. But the fact that 1,000,000 people had died because of him still made his heart feel extremely heavy. Although I've never seen you before, you should be the leader of the Radiant Hall, right? Gray clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. Although he was asking a question, his tone was filled with certainty. A person who could make a city of 1,000,000 people vanish in a single strike was definitely an expert of the laws. And from the other party's appearance, he should not be too old. At the very least, he should not be too old for someone of the laws. Coupled with the fact that he possessed the laws of light, his identity was obvious. He was definitely the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, who had just broken through to the laws of light. That's right, it's me. I never thought that you would still be able to escape under such circumstances. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall looked at Gray and studied him. In reality, he had met Gray before. He was the one who wielded the radiant sword at the entrance of the realm. He was the one who had slashed out the platinum light. However, Gray was only focused on fleeing back then, so he did not pay attention to the surroundings. As a result, he had no idea that they had already met. It was exactly that time that made him treat Gray as a great threat. Clearly, this judgment was correct. He was not someone of the laws of light. He had not even reached the 6th layer of the Destruction Saint Hall, yet he was able to escape from his attack. That was enough to show how much he valued him. What? Aren't you going to escape? Or do you plan on avenging the 1,000,000 people? He looked at Gray mockingly. Gray possessed the ability to teleport. If he wanted to escape, he would not be able to stop him. He said that to provoke Gray into staying behind to avenge the 1,000,000 people and fight him to the death. There's no need to provoke me. I wanted to experience the might of a law saint a long time ago. Gray stared straight at the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. He was indifferent, but there was a hint of madness. Chapter 787. Strengthen. A rhythmic voice rang out, and the world began to tremble. The ubiquitous laws were activated, and a blood-red light appeared, enveloping Gray's body. Immediately, a drastic change occurred on Gray's body. His skin became blood-red, and his aura became thicker. A feeling of power rose in Gray's heart. Whether it was his strength, speed, defense, or blood beast abilities, they were all strengthened several times over. This was the effect of the only derivative ability of the laws of curse that Gray had mastered. Although it was only one derivative ability, Gray felt that it was equivalent to, or even greater than several derivative abilities. Facing an expert of the laws of light, like the Lord of the Light Temple, he did not dare to hold back at all. He immediately used his strongest state. The laws of curse you actually have. 3 kind of laws? As a major figure of a saint-level organization, the Lord of the Light Temple was naturally extremely knowledgeable. When he saw Gray activate the power of laws with music, he immediately recognized that the ability that Gray was using was the laws of curse. His opponent already had the laws of time and the laws of space. Now that he had the addition of the laws of curse, wouldn't that mean that his opponent had 3 kinds of laws? Shock, fear, various emotions filled his heart, and in the end, they turned into intense, killing intent. Before reaching the laws of light, he had already mastered 3 kinds of laws. Even in the history of the Source World, such a person had never appeared before. He no longer dared to imagine how powerful his opponent would be after reaching the laws of light. He had to kill him. He had to kill him at all costs. If he did not die, he would become the greatest threat to the Light Temple. Did the Sacred Eye clan make a mistake in accepting this mission? At this moment, there was another person who was as shocked as the Lord of the Light Temple. He was Jeffrey Sacred Eye, who had been paying attention to Gray's every move using the laws of light. He felt pity when he saw Gray step into the trap step by step. It was not a matter of friend or foe, but it was a pity that Gray's talent was going to be wasted. He was slightly surprised when he discovered that Gray had escaped from the sneak attack of the Lord of the Light Temple. He thought that Gray really was a person who had mastered 2 kinds of laws. He was actually able to escape under such circumstances. At this moment, he was flustered and uneasy. This was the first time he felt uneasy because the Sacred Eye clan had accepted this tracking mission. Not only did the other party control the laws of time and space, but he also controlled the laws of curse. He was a person with 3 laws that had never appeared in history. He was actually standing on the opposite side of such a person. This made him panic and fear. With the other party's potential, once he became a rule-level expert, he would definitely become a terrifying existence that surpassed the saints in the clan in a short period of time. At that time, it would be a disaster for the Sacred Eye clan who had participated in tracking him. At this moment, he actually resonated with the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. We must kill him at all costs. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall charged towards Gray viciously as killing intent surged from him. Swish, swish, swish. Streaks of huge white gold light pillars covered the entire sky, as if they were pillars that supported the heavens and attacked Gray. This was the light of terror, the light of destruction, and the light of divine punishment. Under the white gold light, all matter was annihilated, as if the world was heading towards the end. Even the sturdy space could not bear the burden, and cracks appeared, as if it would completely shatter in the next moment. An invisible spatial barrier appeared before Gray. It was not thick, but it was extremely sturdy. Under the strengthening of the laws of curse, the already sturdy spatial barrier became even sturdier. Bang, bang, bang. Streaks of white gold light pillars collided with the spatial barrier, producing deafening sounds one after another. It was as if meteorites were crashing into the ground. The clouds in the sky were torn apart by the violent sounds of the collisions. Just the sound of the collisions had such power, so one could only imagine how powerful the collisions were. However, the spatial barrier successfully blocked them, blocking the streaks of light and protecting Gray behind it. It was clearly not very thick, but it had an indestructible quality. It was like an eternal monument that could never be destroyed. Spatial barrier. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall narrowed his eyes. Although the spatial barrier was invisible, it could not hide from his eyes as a powerhouse of laws. In his eyes, the invisible spatial barrier appeared clearly. Swish! Enveloped by white gold light, he turned into a streak of light and shot towards Gray rapidly. In almost the blink of an eye, he had approached Gray. With a turn, he bypassed the spatial barrier and attacked Gray from the side. A white gold spear condensed from light stabbed towards Gray like a god's judgment. Under his spear, The space was filled with black cracks. They were like strange patterns that appeared in the air. A powerhouse of laws possessed the ability to break through space and travel through the void world. These strange black patterns were clearly proof that he could break through space. Boom! Just when the white gold spear was about to hit Gray, a second spatial barrier appeared, connecting with the original one and blocking the spear's path. The white gold spear collided with the spatial barrier, and devastating power erupted on the barrier. The barrier rippled, but it still managed to block the devastating attack in the end. An attack that could even break through space was unable to break through the spatial barrier created by Gray. There was only one reason for this, and that was that the current spatial barrier was much tougher than a naturally formed spatial barrier. Spatial barriers were known as the toughest defense. In his strengthened state, the spatial barriers created by Gray's spatial abilities were no weaker than the spatial barriers created by powerhouses of laws. Hum, hum, hum. After blocking the leader of the Radiant St. Hall's attack with the spatial barrier, Gray did not stop there. Spatial barriers rapidly appeared around the leader of the Radiant St. Hall, forming an encirclement with the two original barriers. They were about to seal up the space and trap the leader of the Radiant St. Hall in a spatial cage. He believed that even if the leader of the Radiant St. Hall was a powerhouse of laws, he would definitely struggle to break through the spatial barriers with how tough they were. As a matter of fact, the leader of the Radiant St. Hall's life and death would be completely under his control. As long as the leader of the Radiant St. Hall was trapped in a spatial cage, he had far too many ways to kill him. Swish! Just when the spatial cage was about to close up, the leader of the Radiant St. Hall turned into a streak of white gold light and charged out from the only opening that was not sealed up. As a powerhouse of laws, he could see spatial barriers, and as a Saint Tier organization close to the space-time temple, he knew how terrifying spatial cages were. As a result, when he saw the spatial barriers about to form a spatial cage, he felt a heavy sense of danger. He charged out from the opening without any hesitation. Rushing out of the space cage, he didn't stop there. His figure shrouded in platinum light flashed quickly, circling behind Gray. The platinum light condensed into a huge spear, thrusting towards Gray. Swish! Sensing the danger behind him, Gray suddenly turned around. The purple light was as thick as a mountain, colliding with a huge white gold spear. Rumble! With a terrifying explosion, fine cracks appeared in the space where they collided. It was like glass filled with cracks. Violent tremors swept out in all directions. On the ground, a terrifying ripple spread out, and everything within a radius of dozens of miles disappeared. The mountains, forests, rivers, all of them vanished. The ground was as clean as a piece of paper. It was all yellow sand without any other color. Crack! The white gold spear and the purple light both vanished. This was an evenly matched collision. Gray's laws of time had fended off the leader of the Radiant St. Hall's laws of light. Gray's judgment was not wrong. After his realm had increased by 2 levels, in his strengthened state, he now had the ability to contend with a rule-rank powerhouse. Powerhouses of laws, Gray snorted coldly. The fact had already proven that he could even put up a fight against powerhouses of laws. Swish! In the next moment, he vanished. He appeared behind the leader of the Radiant St. Hall through teleportation. A golden sword that seemed to be made of gold suddenly appeared in his hand. Swish! A thick streak of violet light swept out. It was even thicker than the violet light from before. With terrifying power that could silence everything, it attacked the leader of the Radiant St. Hall. The Sun Sword was the weapon of laws of the Sun St. Hall that had fallen tens of thousands of years ago. After Gray obtained half of the Sun Sword, it had been completely repaired. It finally displayed its former brilliance. A weapon of laws was a terrifying weapon that could amplify the battle prowess of powerhouses of laws. When wielded by Annihilation Powerhouse, they could even put up a fight against a powerhouse of laws. Now that Gray's battle prowess had reached the level of laws, the power of the laws of time he used the sword had increased once again. It had become even more terrifying. Spurt! Space could no longer endure the terrifying power. A pitch-black spatial crack appeared and rapidly extended. It extended towards the leader of the Radiant St. Hall with a violet light. Space shattered with a single strike. A destructive presence permeated the surroundings. Even from 100 kilometers away, the presence of destruction could be sensed. It was a presence filled with despair. All the people who sensed the presence could not help but collapse subconsciously. They knelt on the ground. Their bodies were filled with fear and submission. It was not just them. Even the leader of the Radiant St. Hall, a powerhouse of laws, trembled inside. Even as a powerhouse of laws, he felt powerless before such power. Chapter 788. Spurt. A thick streak of violet light shot through the sky, sweeping past where the leader of the Radiant St. Hall was before striking the ground. There was no earth or stone splashing, nor was there a deep pit large enough to cover an entire city. However, if someone were to dig into the soil, they would discover that wherever the thick purple light hit, all the earth and stone would be pulverized. The depth of the hole was as deep as several thousand meters. The power of the laws of time was not as destructive as the power of the laws of light. However, its power was unquestionable. It possessed the power to make everything decay. Even the toughest metal in the world would decay. The place where the leader of the Radiant St. Hall stood was empty. There were no traces of his existence at all, as if he had been obliterated by the power of the laws of time. However, when Gray saw this empty area, he suddenly became vigilant. Even with the Sun Sword's amplification, his might had increased exponentially, but it was impossible for him to annihilate a rule-level powerhouse with a single strike. Swish! Just when Gray became vigilant, a thick streak of platinum light suddenly appeared to his side. A terrifying presence permeated the surroundings as it attacked him. Crack! With the platinum light, a pitch-black spatial crack appeared, extending along with the platinum light. He had seen this before, as it was the same when Gray used the power of the laws of space earlier. However, the violet light had become platinum. The power of the strike had also exceeded the power of the laws of time. Logically speaking, it should have been difficult for the leader of the Radiant St. Hall to produce such a powerful strike, yet he had managed to do it. A heavy sense of danger stimulated Gray. Before he could even think about how his opponent had done it, Gray swung out with the Sword of the Sun. A thick streak of violet light appeared, receiving the platinum light with the spatial crack. Rumble! The violet light and platinum light collided, causing the world to shake. It was as if the world had a heart, and the heart was beating at this moment. At the very center of the collision, the spatial crack merged. An even larger, pitch-black spatial crack appeared, directly leading to the void world. A terrifying shockwave spread out, sweeping past Gray and even further away. Within a radius of a few dozen miles, the area that had already turned into a desert began to churn like the waves of the sea, creating a huge commotion. Gray, who was swept by the shockwave at extremely close range, could not help but stagger backwards. Even with his alloy and strengthened defenses, shallow wounds appeared on the surface of his body, dripping with blood. He did not pay any attention to the wounds. With the power of his regeneration, the wounds would heal in a single moment. In reality, all the wounds he had suffered from the sneak attack from the leader of the Radiant St. Hall had completely healed now. Even his burnt hair had grown back. Gray said in a deep voice as he looked in the direction where the platinum light had come from. There was a grave look in his eyes. The Sword of Light. In the distance, the leader of the Radiant St. Hall was in a rather horrible condition. Of the radiant of the saint, of the radiant, saint radiant, radiant of the radiant of the radiant of the saint. It was clear that the other party had paid a price for dodging his Sword of Sun's enhanced ability of time. What attracted Gray's attention was the sword in her hand. It was platinum-colored, and the image of a winged woman was engraved on it. It should be the law's weapon of the Radiant St. Hall, the Sword of Radiance. I admit that I underestimated you. The leader of the Radiant St. Hall became extremely sunken. Although he kept saying that he had to take Gray's threat seriously. In fact, after becoming a rule-level powerhouse, he still inevitably felt a sense of superiority when facing Gray. Driven by this sense of superiority, he always looked down on Gray. He always thought that with his strength as a rule-level expert, it was enough to kill the other party, so he had never thought of using a rule-level weapon. He paid the price for underestimating the enemy. If he did not have a very precious magic weapon with teleportation abilities, he might have become the first rule-class elite to be killed by an annihilation class. I won't make the same mistake a second time. After glancing at Gray deeply, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall suddenly vanished before Gray's eyes. Teleportation. Gray was stunned when he saw the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall vanish before him. He had been wondering how the other party had managed to dodge his ability of the laws of time. Now he had an answer. It was teleportation. The other party had used teleportation to dodge his terrifying ability of the laws of time, which could basically be described as a fatal blow. Oh no! A heavy sense of danger filled Gray's entire body, causing his hairs to stand on end. Before he had time to wonder how the other party could teleport, Gray used teleportation reflexively. The heavy sense of danger from behind reminded him that the other party had appeared behind him. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall had indeed appeared behind Gray. As soon as he appeared, the Sword of Radiance burned with platinum-colored flames. Crack! Under the Sword of Radiance, space was split open. A creeping spatial crack appeared, and the creeping spatial crack and the Sword of Radiance sliced towards Gray. Spurt! A wound appeared on Gray's back. Blood spurted out, but the moment it appeared, it was vaporized by the platinum-colored flames. Gray was about to be cleaved in half. Swish! Before he was cleaved in half, Gray barely managed to teleport away. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall had teleported away far too suddenly. He was completely caught off guard. Fortunately, he had used teleportation as soon as he sensed the danger, which saved his life. In the end, he managed to teleport away before the Sword of Radiance could cleave him in half. Several kilometers away, blood flowed from Gray's back. His clothes were completely soaked in blood. He did not even bother to check on his wounds. He stared fixedly at the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall as shock remained on his face. Ability of the laws of space? No, that's not right. It's a weapon of magic power. It's a weapon of magic power that contains the power of the laws of space. Gray thought of the danger he had encountered at the exit of the realm. According to his guess back then, the Radiant Saint Hall should have possessed an item with the power of space. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall must have used this item to teleport. So what if it is? Without giving Gray any time to catch his breath, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall vanished once again with killing intent. It was obvious that he had teleported towards Gray again. As expected, a figure shrouded in platinum-colored light appeared to Gray's left. He wielded the Sword of Radiance, and the platinum-colored flames wrapped around the sword as he attacked Gray. Oomph! Gray snorted coldly. Now that he was prepared, it was naturally impossible for him to be caught by a sneak attack. When the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall appeared, he had already teleported away. Swish! 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 The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall pursued Gray once again. In the air, Gray and the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall appeared and disappeared from time to time. They left behind spatial cracks in the air, making the sky seem like cracked glass. Chilling power expanded as the space became filled with destructive power. Within a range of 100 kilometers, all the creatures prostrated themselves on the ground out of instinctive fear. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, awaiting the judgment of their fates. Swish! Gray teleported away again, but very soon, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall in the distance vanished and chased after him once more. Do you really think that possessing a spatial item is equivalent to grasping the laws of space? Gray did not teleport away as he watched the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall vanish. Instead, he sneered strangely. He had already created enough confusion. It was time to reel in the net. Turning around, the sun's sword was shrouded in purple light. With a silent power, it tore apart the space and slashed towards an empty direction. Swish! A figure shrouded in platinum-colored light appeared before the sword of the sun. It was the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. He just happened to appear where Gray was going to slash towards. as if he had taken the initiative to approach Gray's sword. Naturally, the leader of the Radiant St. Hall would not take the initiative to approach Gray's sword. The reason for this was because Gray knew that he would appear here. Although they were both teleportation abilities, they were different. The leader of the Radiant St. Hall's teleportation ability only came from a spatial item. It was not his own power, while Gray's teleportation ability came from his grasp of the laws of space. It completely belonged to him, so he could control it perfectly. He could even sense the ripples of the Radiant St. Hall's teleportation, which was something the Radiant St. Hall's opponent could not achieve with a spatial item. The difference between the two was obvious. Using a spatial item to catch the Radiant St. Hall's opponent off guard was one thing, but using a spatial item to fight him for a prolonged period of time would definitely lead to a huge opening. What? As soon as he appeared, the sword of the sun with purple light slashed over. The leader of the Radiant St. Hall was rather stunned. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead as a heavy sense of danger pierced through his skin. Swish! He was an expert of laws after all. Although he was extremely surprised, he still made the correct choice. He blocked with the sword in his right hand as the platinum-colored light around him shone dazzlingly. As if he was about to ignite into pure light, he rapidly retreated to the right. Spurt! Although he had already made the correct choice, Gray's attack seemed to possess the ability to predict the future. It was not easy to dodge, as it had struck out even before it had seen him. He dodged his body, but he was unable to dodge his arm. The sword of the sun with purple light swept past his left arm. Blood spurted, and his left arm was severed from the wrist, flying high into the air. Not only that, but the power of time had invaded his body through his arm. He went from being close to 40 to being in his 50s. Naturally, Gray's attacks were nowhere to be seen. Swish! Gray vanished with teleportation. When he reappeared, he was to the left of the retreating leader of the Radiant St. Hall. Before the leader of the Radiant St. Hall could recover from his injuries, the sword of the sun with purple light swept towards the leader's waist viciously. How could the Radiant St. Hall's leader not understand this principle? Chapter 789. Spurt! The sun sword wrapped in purple light slashed towards the waist of the leader of the Radiant St. Hall, along with the spatial crack. The leader of the Radiant St. Hall dodged in a hurry, but he was still struck. Blood splattered as a deep wound appeared on his waist. Under the effects of the laws of time, the leader of the Radiant St. Hall became even older. He was no longer as young as before. It was very difficult to imagine that the old man before him was the leader of the Radiant St. Hall who wanted to kill Gray in high spirits. He failed, and within the palace of the Sacred Eye clan, Jeffrey Sacred Eye, who had been observing the battle with the Eye of Laws, was stunned. He was filled with deep fear. The leader of the Radiant St. Hall, who was already at the level of Laws, was actually at a disadvantage in his battle against Gray Fergus. He had never expected this outcome. Even when he saw Gray Fergus use the third ability of Laws, he did not think the leader of the Radiant St. Hall would lose. Throughout history, there had never been an expert at the level of Laws who had lost to someone at the level of Destruction. The difference between the two was just too great, so great that it was beyond imagination. It was like a chasm. Now, this chasm had been closed. It had been closed by Gray Fergus, who had grasped 3 abilities of Laws. With the 3 abilities of Laws, he already possessed the battle prowess to contend with someone at the level of Destruction. Now, he had even suppressed someone at the level of Laws. This battle prowess shocked and astounded him. Genius was no longer enough to describe him. If he really had to find a word to describe him, he would probably be described as a monster. Yes, a monster. He was an absolute monster. I shouldn't have accepted it. I shouldn't have accepted it in the first place. At this moment, he was filled with regret. He regretted not persuading the Sacred Eye clan to accept this mission. He regretted even more that he had personally led this mission. He should not have provoked such a person at all. If he broke through to the level of Laws, he could basically imagine what would await the Sacred Eye clan. Now that he possessed the battle prowess to rival or even defeat someone at the level of Laws, once he reached the level of Laws, he would probably possess the battle prowess to contend with veteran experts at the level of Laws. To the Sacred Eye clan, That would be an unimaginable disaster. If things went wrong, the Sacred Eye clan would be wiped out. Not good. The teleportation bracelet. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall was pale as cold sweat dripped from his forehead. He was in a terrible state as his body deteriorated due to his old age. His face was pale as cold sweat poured down his forehead. He was in a terrible state. But what made him feel even worse was that he had lost his teleportation bracelet. The teleportation bracelet was a purple bracelet on his left wrist. It was the origin of his teleportation ability. Now, the teleportation bracelet was lost along with his left arm. He had lost his teleportation ability. Whoosh! His body was shrouded in platinum light. His entire body seemed to have transformed into light, shooting into the distance like a real platinum light. This was one of the escape methods of the laws of light. It could allow one to gain unimaginable speed. However, the burden on one's body was extremely great, leaving behind great wounds. Of course, compared to his life, this was nothing. As the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall and an expert at the level of laws, he had plenty of ways to recover as long as he could escape. He could even recover his severed arm and his lost lifespan. What truly made him despair was that even though he had damaged his body, he still could not escape. It was impossible for him to escape before his opponent, who could teleport unless he could teleport as well. Swish! Sure enough, in the next moment, his opponent caught up to him with a single teleportation, even though he had clearly widened the distance between them. His opponent appeared beside him once again. He was unable to stop his opponent in his current state. He was terrified as he dodged in the opposite direction, avoiding the sun sword that was wrapped in the power of the laws of time. His injuries were secondary. What terrified him the most was the decay of time. He had no idea how many more times he could withstand the ravages of time with his aged body. After becoming an expert at the level of laws, he possessed a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. However, his opponent's power of the laws of time would strip away several thousand years of his lifespan each time. His lifespan was about to be stripped away. So what if you're an expert at the level of laws? Let's see if I can kill an expert at the level of laws today. Killing intent filled Gray's eyes as he wielded the sun sword. With a spatial crack, the sun sword that was wrapped in violet light sliced towards the right side of the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. Compared to the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, who was in a terrible state, he was in an extraordinarily good state right now. Although he had suffered quite a wound on his back when the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall had taken him by surprise with teleportation, he had basically recovered thanks to his regeneration abilities. Right now, he felt like he had never been in such a good state before. The only thing he was worried about was that the strengthening effects were about to wear off. However, he was confident that he could kill his opponent who had lost his ability to teleport before the strengthening effects wore off. Although he did not know what spatial item his opponent was using to teleport, the fact that he still did not use teleportation under such circumstances meant that his opponent had lost his ability to teleport. It was very likely that the crux of his teleportation ability lay in his severed left hand. Swish! The sun sword was extremely close to his opponent. Gray believed that his opponent would not be able to dodge it. He would definitely be injured and lose his lifespan. However, in the next moment, his face suddenly changed. The sun sword that he used to slash at the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall swung from bottom to top, toward the sky. A purple beam of light shot up into the sky, accompanied by a crack in the space, shooting towards the sky. And in that direction, there was a black and white ray of light piercing down. The white light was dazzling, while the black light was profound. The two of them intertwined like two magnets that were attracted to each other. They were clearly separated, but they were also intertwined. A huge spatial crack appeared with the black and white light. It was even thicker than the spatial crack from the violet light. It radiated with an even more terrifying presence as it enveloped Gray. Spurt! Under the black and white light, the violet light dispersed in a single strike. The black and white light slammed towards Gray at an oblique angle. It was fast, far too fast. Gray did not even have the time to use teleportation to dodge or block with a spatial barrier. He was struck by the black and white light. Bang! Under the terrifying power of the black and white light, Gray smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater that was several thousand meters across. He was in an extremely miserable state. His body was covered with two types of wounds. One was wounds that seemed to be caused by the scorching light, while the other was wounds that seemed to be caused by the corrosive liquid. His hair that had already grown out had vanished once again. Not only that, but there were vicious wounds on his face as well. A single blow had caused Gray to be seriously injured, and this was only the aftermath of the black and white light breaking through the purple light. If the black and white light had been at its peak, Gray's ending would have been death. Saint Samuel, lying on the ground, Gray raised his head with difficulty. A figure had appeared in the sky before he knew it. It was a figure shrouded in black and white light. He could vaguely make out that it was an old man with a rather strange appearance. The left side of the old man's hair was platinum, while the right side of his hair was pure black. The two different colors were clearly separated in reverence, with the middle of his head as the center. Seeing the other party like this, a name appeared in Gray's mind. It was the veteran maxi-level contender of the Light Saint Temple that he had not seen for a long time, Saint Samuel. According to the information from the Space-Time Temple, the other party had entered the Void Zone for several years and had not returned. He did not expect the other party to have returned from the Void Zone. You've grasped 3 maxi-level abilities before achieving the maxi-level. Since ancient times, in terms of talent, you're number 1. Saint Samuel looked down at Gray from above as he spoke. The other party was praising Gray, but Gray did not feel the slightest joy from being praised. This was because he felt an extremely intense, killing intent from the other party, and it reached its peak in the next moment. However, you shouldn't have stood on the opposite side of the Light Saint Temple. The intense killing intent poured down like an ocean, pressing down on Gray. Boom! Terrifying black and white light appeared, like the terrifying light that had been nurtured at the beginning of the world. It shot toward Gray rapidly, enveloping Gray and the surrounding area. Space shattered, and huge cracks appeared. In the void, it was as if a pitch-black river had appeared. This was definitely not an attack that Gray could contend against. Even if he wielded the maxi-level weapon, the Sun Sword, he would not be able to block it. Faced with an opponent like this, there was only one choice, and that was to escape. Swoosh! Using his spatial maxi-level abilities, Gray immediately prepared to teleport away. He did not know if he could teleport away from such a terrifying attack, but the only way he could think of to save himself now was to teleport, and only teleport had a chance of escaping. Just as the black and white light was about to hit Gray, and just as Gray's figure was about to blur and disappear, a sudden change occurred. A figure appeared in front of the black and white light. Along with him, there was also a spinning black vortex. The black and white light seemed to be fatally attracted to the black vortex. After the black and white light was absorbed by the vortex, it disappeared without a trace. An old man with an extremely ordinary appearance stood before the black and white light. The only thing that was different about him was his eyes. They were pitch black, just like the vortex earlier. They were pitch black, deep, and chilling. Kaluo, you really were hiding. Saint Samuel was not surprised when he saw the old man appear. Instead, he seemed to have expected it. Clearly, he had already expected the old man to be hiding. Aren't you the same? The old man with pitch-black eyes said indifferently, stating a shocking fact. As it turned out, when Gray fought with the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, there were actually 2 veteran experts of laws hiding in the shadows, paying attention to their battle the entire time. Chapter 790. Thank you for saving me, Saint Koro. Stopping his teleportation, Gray let out a long sigh of relief. He looked gratefully at the dark-eyed old man, who was the ghost merchant he had encountered in the plane. If the other party hadn't intercepted the black and white light, he might not have been able to teleport away before the black and white light descended. He had already heard about the existence of the old man from the Space-Time Temple. He knew that the other party was the current saint of the Space-Time Temple. The reason why the other party came out of the plane was to find an extremely special spatial metal that could only exist in the plane. You're welcome. Since you're a member of my Space-Time Temple, I naturally can't let anything happen to you. Looking back at Gray, Saint Koro, the ghost merchant, shook his head with a smile. He had a kind smile on his face and was extremely amiable. Apart from the creepy dark eyes, the old man in front of him was definitely an extremely kind old man. Samuel, you destroyed a city with 1,000,000 entrances of my space-time temple and even killed an elder of my space-time temple. Your radiant temple is becoming more and more presumptuous. Looking away from Gray and towards Saint Samuel, the kindness on Saint Koro's face disappeared and was replaced with hostility. Presumptuous? Why don't I think so? Saint Samuel smiled disdainfully with indifference in his eyes. 1,000,000 people is just a number. At your level, do you still care about this? As for killing an elder of the space-time temple, it's just an unspoken rule of the various saint-level organizations. Didn't my radiant temple's elder also suffer an attack? Sophistry, this can't be a reason for your radiant temple to kill an elder of my space-time temple. Saint Koro's voice was cold, but his anger could clearly be felt. It seems that if I don't make you pay a price today, you really think my space-time temple is easy to bully. A terrifying pressure rose from his body, and it was as if there was an ocean surging out of his body. It filled the sky and surged towards Saint Samuel. Pay a price? If you do well, you can give it a try. Saint Samuel sneered disdainfully. I'd like to know how much battle prowess you can still display with your body that doesn't have much lifespan left. Similarly, a terrifying ocean-like pressure gushed out, surging towards Saint Koluo. Boom! Terrifying pressure collided between the two. Although it couldn't be seen in the void, there was an invisible force colliding. Both Gray and a leader of the Radiant Saint Hall could not help but feel severely threatened when they sensed the terrifying presence. This was a powerful aura that surpassed ordinary laws. Just from this aura, one could tell that the person with this aura was very terrifying. Pressure, to a certain extent, was a reflection of the strength of one's soul. The higher one's cultivation level was, the stronger one's soul was, and the stronger the pressure would be. The two of them were not ordinary rule-level experts, so their souls were naturally stronger than ordinary rule-level experts. Buzz, Saint Koluo attacked. Suddenly, a spatial ripple spread out, and an illusory world rapidly spread out. It overlapped with the real world and pulled the real world into the illusory space. This should be the ability of the shadow space. When Gray encountered the ghost merchant in the plane, he was pulled into such a space. According to the Book of Spatial Laws, in such a space, the possessor of an ability could switch between reality and illusion. No matter how powerful an attack was, it would not be able to hurt them. On the other hand, the enemy could only passively take a beating in such a space and be tortured to death. In such a space, it would not be an exaggeration to call the possessor of the space a god. Swish! As a member of a saint-level organization that had dealt with the space-time temple for more than 100,000 years, Saint Samuel naturally understood the terror of this illusory space. A black and white light swept up the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall and his severed left arm, turning into a platinum light that quickly retreated to avoid the spreading illusory space. In the end, the illusory space stopped after spreading for a few dozen kilometers, and they also stopped a few dozen kilometers away. To be able to spread for a few dozen kilometers, it could easily cover a city. Gray's guess back then was not wrong. The other party's illusory space did indeed cover an entire city. Crack! Unable to sweep the two into the illusory space, Saint Koluo took the initiative to remove the illusory space. The illusory space was like a mirror, shattering. At this instant, Saint Samuel made his move. Boom! The black and white light was like a black and white pillar. It was solid, smashing through space and attacking Saint Koluo. There was clearly a distance of a few dozen kilometers, but the speed was terrifyingly fast, almost stopping in the blink of an eye. Hula! In front of Saint Koluo, a black vortex appeared. It was pitch black, spinning rapidly. The black and white light pillar was attracted by an invisible force and was immediately drawn in. Like a stone pillar that was stuffed into a grinder, it was crushed with a crack. Then, Saint Koluo took a step forward and it was this step that allowed him to appear beside Saint Samuel. The illusory space spread out again. Whoosh! Although he was carrying a person, Saint Samuel's speed was not slow in the slightest. Shrouded in a platinum light, he quickly retreated with the Lord of the Light Palace, barely avoiding the illusory space. You don't have much lifespan left, but you still have such battle strength. I really can't underestimate you. Forced to retreat continuously, Saint Samuel was furious. With a sneer, the black and white light quickly gathered in front of him, finally turning into a strange giant sword. The left side of the giant sword was black, pitch black, as if it could even swallow light, emitting a dark aura. The right side was platinum, dazzling, bright, and filled with a divine aura. The black and white giant sword emitted a dark and divine aura, two completely different auras, attacking Saint Koluo, who had released the illusory space. Kaka! A pitch-black vortex appeared in front of Saint Koluo. He wanted to shatter the oncoming attack again, but this time it seemed to have been turned into an indestructible alloy. It was very difficult to stir it up. Suddenly, the pitch-black whirlpool collapsed, and the broken black and white greatsword collided with Saint Koluo, who was behind the whirlpool. Saint Koluo's body was smashed by the berserk power, and a terrifying wound appeared on his chest as he flew back, blood splattering everywhere. Saint Koluo, Gray's face changed greatly, anxiously calling out. They were both veteran law level experts, so logically speaking, there should not be such a huge gap between the battle strength of the two. He could not help but think of the words of Saint Samuel. Under normal circumstances, unless there was not much lifespan left and the body was extremely old, otherwise the battle strength of a blood warrior would not be greatly weakened. And the situation of Saint Koluo was very likely such a situation. Pung! Saint Koluo only stabilized his body after flying back several miles. Although he maintained his body in the air, the injuries on his body were extremely serious, and blood kept spilling out. Suddenly, purple light filled his body. Then, a strange scene appeared. The injuries on his body and even the clothes on his body were recovering. In the end, they were all healed. Time rewind. Seeing this, Gray's eyes suddenly lit up. Time rewind was a derivative ability of the law of time. It could reverse time for certain things, including oneself. With this ability, as long as Saint Koluo was not injured and immediately died, he could easily recover. The speed of recovery far exceeded the recovery ability. To a certain extent, this was an ability stronger than self-healing and reverse nurturing abilities. Of course, the effect of this ability was not only in terms of healing injuries, but healing injuries was only one of the uses of this ability. Think about it. If a person who had lived for thousands of years suddenly became 10,000 years younger, what would the result be? Nothing would be left behind, not even bones. Samuel, I indeed don't have much lifespan left, but if you think you can beat me like this, you are taking it for granted. The injuries on his body were healed, but the purple light still shrouded Saint Koluo. He coldly looked at Saint Samuel, his eyes full of arrogance. The purple light shrouding Saint Koluo became deeper, and then a change that surprised Gray even more appeared. Saint Koluo's face became younger. The wrinkles on his face gradually disappeared, and his skin gradually tightened. In the end, the other party turned into a middle-aged man. This was a very imposing middle-aged man with a tall figure and a broad chest. Whether it was his figure or temperament, he gave people a sense of loftiness. Black hair like ink, heroic spirit, clothes slightly bulging, strong and well-proportioned muscles under the clothes, and a pair of thick and powerful hands. His face vaguely had the outline of the current Saint Koluo, and the iconic pitch-black eyes were also present. This was definitely Saint Koluo in his peak state. Saint Koluo actually returned to his peak state through time rewind. Chapter 791. Restored to his peak state, Saint Samuel's face became gloomy. He did not expect Saint Koluo to be able to restore himself to his peak state through time. I don't believe that you can really reverse time and restore yourself to your peak state. The giant black and white sword of light, like a sword of divine punishment, cut through the space, bringing with it two completely opposite auras of darkness and holiness, and once again attacked St. Kaluo. Crash! The pitch-black vortex appeared again. This time it was even larger and deeper. The giant black and white sword, with a terrifying aura, struggled and was sucked into it, and then completely shattered. But the pitch-black vortex did not disappear and continued to rotate in the sky, emitting a terrifying suction force. On the ground, a large amount of soil was sucked into it like earth dragons, disappearing without a trace. It was not crushed, but even the traces of its existence had disappeared. It was unknown whether it had completely disappeared or was transmitted to someplace. In the sky, Saint Samuel's figure was affected by a strong suction force. He was unable to stabilize his figure and was being sucked into the pitch-black vortex. You have really recovered to your peak state. Saint Samuel's face was solemn, his body erupting with a strong white gold and black light. Relying on this terrifying eruption of light, he finally got rid of the suction of the pitch-black vortex and retreated. However, just as he was getting rid of the suction force, the terrifying suction force suddenly disappeared and was replaced by the middle-aged Saint Kaluo, who appeared beside him. Boom! A small pitch-black vortex appeared in his hand, and Saint Kaluo punched out at Saint Samuel. Saint Samuel's face changed slightly, and a black and white light appeared in his hand, blocking the punch. Gotcha! Under the pitch-black vortex, the black and white radiance shattered. Not only that, but a layer of the flesh on Saint Samuel's fist was forcibly shaved off. A few of his fingers were cut off, and blood flowed out. Boom! The black and white light on Saint Samuel's body erupted, producing a powerful impact that separated him from Saint Kaluo. Sweeping a glance at his hand that was almost equivalent to a cripple for ordinary people, his face was ashen. You won, but don't be happy too early. Saint Samuel's voice was cold. I don't believe that you can maintain this state for a long time. How many years can you live with your current lifespan? After you die, I will destroy him and the space-time temple together. Activating the teleportation bracelet, Saint Samuel disappeared with the Lord of the Light Palace, completely disappearing without a trace. After the two of them disappeared, Saint Caro's tall and burly figure began to change drastically. His face turned old and his black hair turned white. In the end, he returned to his old appearance. Obviously, as Saint Samuel had judged, Saint Coro couldn't completely reverse time and keep himself in the peak state. Not only that, after the battle, Saint Kaluo clearly showed signs of fatigue. The figure floating in the air was slightly unstable and almost fell from the sky. Saint Coro, are you all right? Gray worriedly stepped forward. He could see that Saint Kaluo was not in a good state. His body that did not have much lifespan left was actually so weak that he could not even fight. Don't worry, I'll recover after a while. Saint Kaluo shook his head and looked at Gray. From the fact that the Lord of the Radiant Temple can accurately pinpoint your location, it's very likely that the Radiant Temple has hired the Sacred Eye clan to track your location. Before you reach the level of rules, you'd better stay in the Space-Time Temple. Otherwise, no matter where you go, you'll be tracked. Sacred Eye clan? This is a saint-level force? Gray was puzzled. Before this, he had never heard of the Sacred Eye clan. Yes, this is indeed a saint-level force, and the blood technique that this force has mastered has an extremely terrifying tracking ability. Unless you hide in a plane, even if you are hundreds of thousands of miles away, they can still track your location at any time. Saint Kaluo explained, they can track my location at any time, even if I'm hundreds of thousands of miles away. Gray's face was solemn, a strong sense of uneasiness growing in his heart. If the other party could really track his location from hundreds of thousands of miles away, then the Leopold family was likely to have been exposed. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel a strong anger. He had no enmity with the Sacred Eye clan, but he was targeted by the Sacred Eye clan and almost died in the ambush of the Radiant Temple. He would remember this debt, and when he has the strength in the future, he will definitely make the Sacred Eye clan pay the price. He followed Saint Kuluo back to the temporal temple. After bidding farewell to Saint Kuluo and returning to his residence in the temporal temple, Gray immediately contacted Fod through an invisible spiritual connection. With him as a target, the Radiant Temple naturally wouldn't deal with a small character like the Leopold family. But if he continued to stay in the temporal temple, the Radiant Temple would probably move against the Leopold family, or even use the Leopold family to force him out of the temporal temple. Lord Gray. Before long, a voice rang out in Gray's mind. It was Fod's voice. The Leopold family has been exposed. Take our people and the Fergus family and quietly move to the Urgus family. Gray ordered. He had thought of moving the Fergus family to the temporal temple, but the temporal temple wasn't absolutely safe. After all, St. Kuluo didn't have much time left. So the best way was to hide his relationship with the Fergus family and the Fergus family. Yes, Lord Gray. I will arrange for the transfer immediately. Understanding the seriousness of the matter, Fod hurriedly said, "Inform me immediately if the situation is wrong." After thinking about it, Gray still didn't feel at ease. "I understand," Fod said sternly. After making arrangements for the Fergus family, Gray finally had time to consider his current problem. Now, his every move was under the surveillance of the Sacred Eye clan. As soon as he left the temporal temple, he would immediately be discovered by the Sacred Eye clan and be hunted down by the Radiant Temple. If he wanted to live, he could only stay in the temporal temple, because only Saint Kuluo of the temporal temple could protect him. If that was all, it would be fine. He believed that with the transformed state, even if he cultivated step by step, he was confident that he could become an expert of the rules and have the strength to contend against the Radiant Temple and the Sacred Eye clan. What made him slightly uneasy was Saint Kuluo's lifespan. The aging of his body had seriously affected his battle prowess, which meant that his lifespan was extremely short. It was very likely that he only had a few years left. He could imagine that as long as his lifespan was exhausted, the Radiant Temple would definitely invade. At that time, both he and the temporal temple would face a life and death crisis. I have to reach the level of the rules as soon as possible. The only solution now was to reach the realm of the rules before Saint Kuluo passed away. With the abilities of the 4 laws he currently grasped, he believed that after reaching the realm of the rules, he would immediately possess the battle prowess to contend against veteran experts of the rules. At that time, all the dangers would naturally cease to exist. On the other hand, the ones who should feel the danger should be the Radiant Temple and the Sacred Eye clan. If I want to increase my cultivation level quickly, supplementary cultivation medicines are essential. However, I still have an exchange for the 6th grade supplementary medicine of the wood element. He had left the temporal temple this time to exchange for supplementary cultivation medicines of the wood element from Master Bennett. Unfortunately, he had been attacked before he had even arrived, so he could only return helplessly. Looks like I can only ask Hall Master Philip to make a trip for me. Gray went to Hall Master Philip's residence. After informing him of his identity, he saw Hall Master Philip very soon. "Gray, it's wonderful that you're fine. I never thought that the Radiant Temple would be so shameless as to ambush you with an expert of the rules. Fortunately, you're fine." Hall Master Philip heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Gray. With the potential that Gray had shown and the relationship between Gray and the Temporal Temple, if he could reach the realm of the rules in the future, the Temporal Temple would definitely benefit greatly. As the Deputy Hall Master of the Temporal Temple, he was naturally happy that Gray was fine from the bottom of his heart. If St. Kuluo had not saved me in time, I'm afraid I would have been dead by now. Gray shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Hall Master Philip, I've come to ask for your help this time." "What help?" "As long as I can do it, I won't refuse," Hall Master Philip said seriously. Not long ago, they had received an order from St. Kuluo. The order mentioned that they should try their best to satisfy Gray's needs. It could be seen that St. Kuluo admired Gray very much. Now that Gray had come to ask for help, he naturally would not refuse. In fact, I was going to go to Master Bennett's place to exchange for the 6th grade supplementary medicine of the wood element. Unfortunately, I was ambushed midway. Gray explained, "Now that I've been targeted by the Sacred Eye clan, Once I leave the temporal temple, I'll immediately be hunted down by the light temple. Therefore, I'd like to ask you to go to Master Bennett's place in exchange for the 6th grade supplementary medicine of the wood element for me. No problem. Hall Master Philip agreed without hesitation. It was just helping to make a trip, and it was not a big deal. Naturally, there was no need to hesitate. Of course, this was only relative to Gray. If it was anyone else, even if it was an elder of the temporal temple, it would be absolutely impossible to ask a big shot like him to make a trip. Although it was nothing to him, he was a big shot and would not do such a thing easily. A few days later, a green potion was handed to Gray by Hall Master Philip. Gray finally got the 6th grade supplementary medicine of the wood element that he needed the most at the moment. After getting the potion, Gray immediately entered the training room. After thinking for a while, he directly entered the wooden house in the plain that he had opened. According to St. Kuluo, the Sacred Eye clan's rule of eyes could monitor his every move even if he was hundreds of thousands of miles away. However, there was one situation where it could not monitor him, and that was when he was in the plain. The plain was the best natural barrier. Even the rule of eyes could not penetrate the barrier of the plain and monitor him. Chapter 792. He took out the level 6 wood elemental supplementary potion. Inside the transparent crystal bottle, there was a green liquid that looked like vegetable juice. Opening the bottle, a fragrance spread out. Then a strange change occurred. In the wooden house, the dead trees began to grow leaves. In an instant, the entire wooden house was filled with leaves. Gray quickly swallowed the potion. Immediately, a cool and comfortable feeling appeared in his body. Finally, it gathered at his heart, and at his heart, the blood force began to quickly change from purple to green. The speed of the change was much faster than when he took the flame potion. After taking the supplementary potion twice, the only difference was that the wood elemental was in a second transformation state, while the fire elemental was not. This undoubtedly proved Gray's judgment. The transformation state had a great effect on the absorption of the special substance in the supplementary potion. After a few more days, Gray's blood force had completely turned green. He completed the transformation of the wood elemental ability. With the blood force driving his soul and body, his entire body had transformed. He had reached the 4th level of the destruction class. After completing the transformation of the wood elemental ability, Gray suddenly felt a communication from Fod in his own courtyard in the Temple of Time and Space. There was clearly an anxious mood in the communication. He quickly established a soul communication with Fod through the soul connection. "What's going on?" Gray asked. "Sir Gray, according to the report of the spies sent by the Yuga's family, not long ago, a group of people broke into Leo City and destroyed the Leopold family. None of the members of the Leopold family survived." Fod said anxiously. The Leopold family was destroyed? Gray's face turned ashen. He didn't need to think to guess who did it. What a good temple of light. They really live up to their name of light. In order to anger me and draw me out, they really are willing to do anything. Fortunately, he had ordered his own people in the Leopold family and the Fergus family to move. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unthinkable. There were a total of 2 groups of people who attacked the Leopold family. One of them had a platinum sword symbol on their clothes. They were from the Temple of Light. The other group had a strange golden vertical eye symbol on their clothes. I don't know which faction they were from. Fod continued. "There's a symbol of a golden vertical eye on his clothes. This is the symbol of the Sacred Eye clan. Not only is the Sacred Eye clan assisting the Radiant Saint Hall, but they're actually working with the Radiant Saint Hall now." Gray clenched his fists so tightly that crackling sounds could be heard. Gray's face turned even more ashen. Previously, the Sacred Eye clan had only provided information and did not participate in the actual operation. Now that they had actually assisted the Radiant Saint Hall in attacking the organization he belonged to, it could be said that they had completely sided with the Radiant Saint Hall. However, he did not know that the Sacred Eye tribe was in a state of panic after finding out that he possessed 3 rules. After the panic, all the members of the upper echelon of the Sacred Eye clan gathered to discuss their plans urgently. In the end, the Sacred Eye clan decided to go all the way and form an even closer alliance with the Radiant Saint Hall. They wanted to kill Gray before Gray matured. It wasn't that they hadn't thought of reconciling with Gray, but after speculating, they felt that in the face of such a life-and-death feud, Gray would probably not agree to reconcile. Their speculations were not wrong. He had almost been killed by the Sacred Eye clan, so the Sacred Eye clan was already on Gray's must-kill list. Even if the Sacred Eye clan came to reconcile, Gray would at most reconcile on the surface and settle the score after he became stronger. After resting for a day and calming down, Gray began the follow-up training. The first thing he did was to check the changes in the blood force in his body. After all, he was different from ordinary people and had the unique characteristic of a second metamorphosis. The green blood force is mixed with the black blood force. It seems that the second metamorphosis is a poison-type ability. According to the description in the Book of Time, the blood force turning black was a sign that the poison-type ability was undergoing metamorphosis. Therefore, Gray determined that the second metamorphosis was a poison-type ability. My luck is not bad. I just happen to have a level 6 supplementary medicine for poison-type abilities. Gray was delighted. Previously, he had exchanged 2 types of level 6 supplementary medicine from Elder Tina, who was in charge of resources in the Space-Time Temple. There was a poison type among the 2 types of level 6 supplementary medicine. This would undoubtedly allow him to absorb the medicine faster. He recalled the secret method of time and blood related to the poison type in his mind, and then began to train. After spending a few days, Gray had trained the poison-type secret method to the point where it was instinctive to his body. He took out the level 6 supplementary medicine for poison type. It was a black medicine and looked very dangerous. It was as if it was highly toxic. It was indeed poisonous. The main ingredient to make this supplementary medicine was poisonous foggrass. It was a level 6 magical medicine that was highly toxic. However, this poison had been combined with other supplementary medicine during the refining process. The toxicity had become very weak. For people who had poison-type abilities and strong poison resistance, this poison was nothing. He opened the bottle and drank it. The numbness after being poisoned spread throughout his body and then gathered in his heart. His body no longer felt uncomfortable. The metamorphosis of the poison-type ability began to increase at a terrifying speed. Just like the wood-type ability, the metamorphosis of the poison-type ability was completed in a month and a few days. It led to the metamorphosis of the soul and body. It reached level 5 of the destruction class. After a short rest, he continued to train. The blood force began to turn blue. This meant that the second metamorphosis was a water-type ability. The second metamorphosis ability was different from the rest of the level 6 auxiliary cultivation potions. Gray was not surprised. Having one metamorphosis ability that was the same was already very lucky. It was very unlikely that both abilities were the same. He had level 6 supplementary medicine for the ice element. The second metamorphosis was for the water element. In the end, Gray chose the ice element as the next metamorphosis ability. If he chose the ice element as the metamorphosis ability, it would take him around 3 months to complete the metamorphosis. Compared to the wood and poison elements, it was much longer. If he chose the second metamorphosis of the water element and did not have level 6 supplementary medicine, it would take him years. Comparing the two, it was obvious which one he should choose. After practicing the ice element secret method and turning it into his body's instincts, he took the ice element level 6 supplementary medicine. 3 months later, the ice element metamorphosis was complete. I have finally reached level 6 of the destruction class. Gray let out a long sigh. Although he already had the power to crush level 6 destruction class elites, he had finally reached level 6 of the destruction class. The 6th level of the destruction class was a very important level. It was the most important level of the destruction class because it was the transition from destruction class to rule class. If one could cross it, they would be rule class. If one could not cross it, they would only be destruction class. After 1,000 years, their lifespan would be used up and they would become a skeleton. In history, at least 99% of the destruction class elites were stuck at this level. They could not progress any further. After resting for 4 or 5 days, Gray adjusted his condition. He started to pay attention to the training after the 6th level of the Destruction class. He quickly recalled the records of the Book of Time and the Book of Space regarding the 6th level of the Destruction class. Learn the rules. In the 2 books, there were detailed descriptions and introductions of the training after the 6th level of the Destruction class. After thinking about it, Gray came to a conclusion. The training after the 6th level of the Destruction class was to learn the rules. After the 6th level of the Destruction class, the training was to use a secret skill to learn the rules of one's body. In the end, one would be able to control the rules completely. That kind of complete control was to use all the power of one's rule power. Before reaching rule class, although one could have rule power, it was only on the surface. One could not dig out all the power of the rule power. To give a simple example, before one could control the rules and become rule class, the rule power was like a powerful but messy army in the hands of the user. To this army, the rule power user could not command and control it. They could not use their strongest power. After reaching the rule level, one would have absolute control over this army. They would be able to make this army fight in a specific formation and unleash their strongest combat power. That was not all. Aside from that, it also involved digging deeper into the rule power. Before becoming a rule class elite, many people were unable to dig out all the derivative powers of their rule power. If they could not dig out some of the derivative powers, the power of their rule power would be greatly reduced. The process of complete control was also the process of digging out the derivative powers. When one achieved rule power, one could understand all the derivative powers of the rule and use them freely. Just learning is not very useful in the transformation mode. Gray raised his eyebrows. The characteristic of the transformation ability was that it could trigger the transformation of one's body, soul, and blood power. However, the comprehension of rule power involved an illusory understanding ability. The transformation ability was not useful. Of course, that did not mean that the transformation ability was useless. Whether one wanted to obtain more rule power or to obtain a faster transformation speed, the transformation ability was essential. Of course, that was after becoming a rule class elite. Fortunately, I have super memory. I'm confident that my comprehension ability is not inferior to anyone. What made Gray feel relieved was that he had super memory among the abilities he had. Not only did this ability give him super memory, but it also gave him super logical comprehension ability. With this ability, his speed of understanding blood skills increased tremendously. He had completely understood Berserk blood skill a long time ago. Of course, he did not use Berserk blood skill during the battle. At his current level, blood skills could no longer enhance him. To become a rule class elite, one needs to comprehend rules. Blood skills also need to comprehend rule imprints. Blood skills are probably a byproduct of the process of comprehending rules. Gray's heart skipped a beat. He immediately understood the origin of blood skills. It was precisely because blood skills were only a byproduct of comprehending rules that they were naturally useless to him, who had reached the rule class.